Hey guys, it's FromCheng here, and welcome to the Armored Core Legacy Staff Roundup. For today, we will be giving our reviews about Armored Core 6, and then we'll be delving into a little bit more detail talking about community topics. So this will be things such as difficulty in Armored Core, community growth, speed, cover, range, and energy in the game, and a whole lot more. With me today, I have the entire Armored Core Legacy crew. First off, going alphabetically, we have Cleric here.
Hello, everyone. How you doing?
Yep. And then we have Tearsin.
Yes, I am. I am not dead, despite what it may have looked like going leading up to the release of the game. Just seeing these guys at all the other things. No, I'm still here. What's up, everybody? Happy to be with the group. Happy to talk about this game.
Awesome. And then also, last but not least, we have Zealous.
Hey, bringing up the caboose in the alphabet. It is fantastic to be here. Thanks so much, Cheng, for helping organize this. It's going to be a blast getting a chance to sit down in a roundtable style talk about AC6, kind of out of the event light for once, and sort of now that we've had a little bit of time in our own spaces with it to kind of deal with what we have going on with the game. So great to be here. Thanks.
Absolutely. Yep. So again, just to reiterate, we'll be going over first, basically giving our own mini reviews on Armored Core 6. This may not be as in-depth just because we have that community topics piece. That's where it's going to cover a lot of those additional details. But that being said, we're going to go and get started. So I will start off. So Armored Core 6 is the 16th entry into the series and represents a rebirth and reimagining of the titular series, not only with its differences from previous iterations, but also how it chooses to approach common concepts in design and gameplay in comparison with how the series has historically handled it. So, for example, we have a focus on a stagger system. If you ever played Sekiro, it's very similar to that, where the player works to fill the stagger bar, which puts the enemy in a weakened and inactionable state, allowing the player to do massive amounts of damage. In comparison with previous games, we're using the right stick to generally move, and then the left stick to move the camera, in comparison with the strafe-based system in previous games, where you use the stick or the bumpers, if you go really old school, to move the AC left and right, and then the right stick controls the camera. We also have the soft/hard lock-on system. So by default, if the enemy is in range, it will lock on, and the player is able to toggle with the hard lock that will always track the enemy at the cost of significantly reducing accuracy. And then when it comes to energy recovery, movement, and weapons tracking, these have been revised to encourage players to stay close to their enemies and defeat them using short but concentrated bursts of firepower. So the gameplay is fast-paced, but it is for short periods of time. When it comes to the single player, there's about 60 missions, but in comparison with, let's say, the previous entry, these are a longer format. So the maps are larger, and there's more to do with combat logs, entry logs, and also hidden enemies scattered about. These larger maps also basically give players the ability to explore, move around, and also just do more in general. The storytelling follows a similar format to AC4, with narrative being woven in through mission briefings and character dialogues with occasional cutscenes, but also pulls some pages from previous games like Nexus and 3 with messages in the form of audio recordings that provide further context and clues as to what's happening on Rubicon and individual character motivations. This information is presented in an overall non-intrusive way, so players can feel free to ignore it if they are more interested in the gameplay, but those with sharp ears can piece together the history and tragedy of Armored Core 6. It also offers 3 endings, with mission branching similar in design to Last Raven, where choosing specific missions which will modify the path you are on, which also affects new missions moving forward and your potential ending. Overall, I feel this is a strong improvement in comparison with 5 and Verdict Day in terms of not only the general design of the missions, but also all the various components. So the map design, how enemies are laid out, basically how you can approach those missions in general, especially in the very early game missions when you don't have all the parts and you are a little bit more resource restricted. It definitely makes you play in a way that is more careful. And as you go on, you get better parts and a better understanding of the game mechanics. And it basically it makes it a much more interesting experience than with some of the previous entries. When it comes to other components of the games, for example, the music feels more in line with Last Raven, with most of the tracks meant to be set pieces in the background that you notice, but doesn't necessarily overwhelm everything else that is happening in the game. There are some exceptions, such as Contact with You, which plays during the boss battle with Balteus, or Rough and Decent, which you primarily hear when you're in missions with Carla, which have a notable vibe and power to them that makes them stand out above the rest. This means in general, the music in Armored Core 6 is more suitable, is more subtle and sublime in the moments that you do notice it, as it doesn't overwhelm the player's overall experience. Now, beyond those, we also have the multiplayer. So multiplayer in comparison with the previous games, and specifically I mean 5 and Verdict Day, sort of take a back seat here. So you have a very basic system where you're able to do 1v1s and 3v3s and not really much else. The system itself is fairly bare bones, and it's very restrictive. So there's not a whole lot that you can adjust for. So for example, if you're doing the 3v3s, which is team-based matchmaking or team-based deathmatch, you can't adjust really any of the factors. So you can't do a 2v2, do a 1v3. You can't change it from points mode, stuff like that. So it's very inflexible in design. Now, the other thing too is that Armored Core 6, sort of being an Armored Core game, does have its fair share of imbalances. And I think the biggest one is there are a small number of parts that trivialize many enemies in the game, and the ability to restart at the checkpoint means players are punished less. Enemy attacks, particularly bosses, are made easier with sound and visual indicators, along with large startup windows. This, in combination with the lack of a true New Game Plus mode, so like what's offered in the Dark Souls series, does sort of hurt the replayability and the overall challenge in the games. Now, that being said, Armored Core 6 in general doesn't do a lot that's egregiously bad. Say for, let's say, the multiplayer modes. A lot of what we see in this game are refinements of what we had from previous games, and some of them are done extremely well. In my opinion, I would give this game about a 7 to 7.5, relatively, when it comes to scoring, where there's a lot of good stuff here. There's a good amount of replayability, but there's definitely stuff that they need to work on moving forward.
Yeah, who's going to follow all that? Go ahead.
It falls just like it falls to me. And
Right.
I'll be taking second spear here on the review, and what I want to do is really just walk through some order here and go through some contours. By the way, Cheng, really thorough job, man. I kind of felt like I was sitting right in like a mainline studio listening to you. There's really a number of categories. We talked a little bit about this beforehand that we want to look at them, but I want to walk through each step, kind of talk to some of the stage and texture things, especially the music. I'm going to have a lot to say about that, and also general gameplay, story, etc. So I guess I'm just going to start from the top. I'm going to march through this in order. Essentially, the story of AC6, anybody who's familiar with From Software games, it has this very, of course, dystopian, bleak, kind of hopeless despair, this tone to it. And if you're familiar with any kind of From games, and especially Armored Core games, this is not necessarily new ground, which is a good thing. In addition, I think the overall aesthetic the story lends itself to, that is being spacefaring, space age. This is very welcome, for me at least. I was a big fan of Armored Core 2 when that was released right at the tippy top of PlayStation 2 in that early era in the 2000s, right at 2000 actually. And seeing that again, especially the idea of spacefaring, super high tech, really bleeds into the aesthetic of the rest of the game. AC2 felt very fresh on the idea plate, and time for potential really crazy things. It was the advent of Overboost. We got that introduced, and there's a lot of very cool parts and different types of melee weapons and things that are here. So overall, I'll get into that when we talk more about in general gameplay. I'll cover that some. But first and foremost, you guys have seen it from the title. Many of you have actually played it. Of course, played through, done your own runs of the story. So while I won't review that blow by blow, I think looking at this in the context of the sort of soft reset to AC in general. There were a lot of questions. Do we have to play all the other Armored Core games, the other 15 before this, to understand the storyline of AC6? And I could definitely say you don't. You can really come into Armored Core 6, and if you want to just experience that and enjoy it for what it is, you can. Of course, you're going to see certain themes and motifs repeat themselves, especially from the early AC games. You guys are familiar in the Armored Core 3 series of layered things like that. While we don't follow the whole humanity subjugation idea that we pursued in Armored Core 1, the underground cities, and then Armored Core 3 and things like that, you still have these just very, very oppressive, way too powerful corporations that are warring over resources, which is what a lot of AC games would come down to. The section I really want to zoom in on is music here. This is always really important to me as a player too. From garage themes to really slamming battle tracks, there's a lot of them we can go back and remember, ranging all the way back from Armored Core 1. I think back to Insurance Money. Also, we go to AC2, like Firework. And then we have the remix of that Firework Circuit edit. There's so many memorable tracks. We go in AC3 era, Morning Lemon Tea, Monkey Likes Daddy, etc. It's difficult coming out of AC6. Taking any of those themes is really like very iconic. I jump back to even AC4, Panther, For Answer, Someone's Always Moving on the Surface, the Bloody Honey Cannot Stop, etc., etc. The soundtrack, I think, being muted, like Cheng was saying, being more in the background, being more supportive and more ambient for what's happening. There's stages that works, like the end of Chapter 1, I think, going into Chapter 2, with the sort of weird, spooky, haunting, the voices in your mind, that works. But the soundtrack was somewhere I was really missing. Kota Hoshino is the main composer for this one. He's been for most of the Armored Core games, but it wasn't just him on board. I believe Takashi Onodera and also Shoei Miyazawa were also two of the co-producers who also worked on themes. I don't have the exact track list in front of me that they did, but I did find it interesting that Hoshino was accompanied by a couple. And I know during development, there's this concept that Hoshino was kind of given some direction by Yamamura. The idea of the tone was loneliness, nostalgia. And he had a lot of freedom in his composition to create that. Normally when we hear AC music, it's that very kind of crazy cyberpunk, weird opera, distorted lyrics, which we really didn't get into as much. So there really aren't as many highlight tracks. That was missing for me. Especially the garage themes, even though we have 3 garage themes. Similar to Last Raven, the more you progress through the game, different garage themes open up depending on the mood, the tone, the story, and everything that's going on. Coming down to general gameplay, I was talking a bit about the parts and my introduction and what we have here. And this is a place where AC6 really shines. Seeing things like the energy lance, the plasma whips, explosive launchers. It's almost like an amped up version of the inside part urchins. Those of you remember that from Armored Core Nexus and some of the other games in 3rd gen. Classics like the grenade launcher returning with absolutely metal names like the Earshot and stuff like that. Coral weapons really reminded me of the Kojima weapons from AC4. It's a love letter for weapons all over the series with some on top of that, and I love that. Just being freed, I think, from blades alone is huge. And it's opened up amazing opportunities. I know there's a lot of people out there that miss their dual blading, especially coming out of AC4 and 4A, but there's a ton of pulse shields. There's a ton of really cool left arm weapons, and that's one of the most impressive advents for me. I've really, really enjoyed. The weaponry has just not let itself down. I've just been having a ball just testing and running different quads with all kinds of different setups. So it's fine here. And of course, that naturally ties into the mechanics. Cheng has covered stagger, how you use some of these things. If you played Sekiro, of course, that's going to be a really big point. And tying your weapon loadout together, this is the first Armored Core game where you can interlock and fire your right and your left arm and also your 2 back cannons all at once. Or you can take a page out of 5/Verdict Day and use the hanger system. So instead of using back cannons, you can swap to something that you'd normally be using in your hands, which is just cool. If you want to mix it up and have a back cannon and a hanger, there's actually options in your equipment you can actually run through, and that's a lot of fun. Just for the raw fire escape and the kind of firepower you can bring to the field in your AC. On the paper, you would think, oh, that's overpowered, being able to fire everything at once, right? But in actual practice, I think when you get down to the actual logistics of the game and get into the gameplay loop and flow, I think the whole thing blends very well, very well. Movement is still something big, of course. Overboost now being called Assault Boost. Being able to be very specific in your directionality. E.g., Overboost not just being a forward and have a little bit of rise. You can control your descent. You control your ascent more with it. In fact, sometimes it's going to be a lot better, depending on your booster, to do your ascent with your assault boost instead of just raw vertical boosting. And that's very, very apparent because you start playing around with different generators and boosters and parts. So I know I was thrown off for something fierce in the first like half an hour or so. And Cheng remembers too. We were in our first trip to California. I just got thrown for a trip. Being able to turn your AC towards your camera and everything, and the movement and sort of how strafe was removed. So if you're a veteran coming in, there's just a few little speed bumps, but it still feels like Armored Core at the end of the day. I think that's the important thing. And of course, the customization, lockstep on the money. It's very straightforward. There aren't too many inside options. Your frame, your weapons, your inside, the FCS, etc. Optional parts have taken the biggest overhaul with now the OS tuning. Instead of just like 14 to 20 something slots you can equip, you earn those points via arena, and there's all kinds of neat options. Permanent options you can unlock for your AC, such as weight control, being able to start and come in overweight, or be able to use the hanger system, and others like damage mitigation that are going to just help you out all the time. And then optional things like terminal armor or assault armor, of course, with assault armor making its way back in from AC4. So really a love letter from all over. I'm a huge fan. My last favorite AC game was Last Raven, and I can really say, after having some time here, that still AC6 is just coming just out an absolute top for me. I am thoroughly enjoying it so far. One of my favorite AC games I've ever played, and digging into the loop of PvP is going to be a blast. I know some people are worried about that, the replayability, especially those of you looking from a story perspective. But if anyone's ever had an interest in PvP, this is definitely the time for it. I think the last time we really had a true drought was during Ninebreaker back on PS2, and it was ideal to be part of a community then, or have like a tournament scene or something going to kind of keep you engaged in the verses. So I don't think AC6 is that dry. Still, the loop is going to, in my opinion, really, really come back to times in PvP. Overall, I greatly enjoy it. I might wait till the end here when we circle back around and give it my number review, but I'm loving it.
Fantastic.
Oh man, all that, you're not going to give us a number?
Can we just do it now and just not?
Yeah, well, Cheng did.
Yeah.
Okay. If we're rating this at Cheng, you were at a 10, right? And I believe
Yes.
you said 7 to 7.5.
Yep.
For me, I've really been having a ball. For me, this is a 9 out of 10.
Oh,
Nice.
I'm immensely enjoying it.
all right. Okay, I'll go. I'm not gonna.
Right.
I'm not gonna be all that. I'm not gonna be all what these guys were. Yeah. Okay. So first, I'll give my number off the bat. In a grade Armored Core on the curve, because it is Armored Core, and I do not look at this series as I would look at any other series, for gaming. Period. It's an 8 out of 10. It loses the whole point for what I think is one of the biggest crimes for this game, which is that there's no crossplay. And that is because there's no excuse. There's no good excuse for there not to be crossplay in this game on the infrastructure that they built this game on. Besides that, it loses a point. Just, there's a couple things that are lacking here for me. I would agree with what they were saying about the music. There's a lot of good music in the game. A lot of it's like there's nothing fun. I think that's the biggest thing for me is like there's no fun music in this game. There's always been fun music in Armored Core games, and there's nothing fun in this one. The story, it's a good story. I think how you discover the story is really interesting, and it's kind of in a method that Armored Core games are kind of used to giving you story and story bits. And that being said, I found my options and my choices, or should I say lack thereof, very frustrating. Because to be quite honest, if I was a Raven, if I was really going through that, the moment that air got into my head at the end of chapter 1, I would have packed up and left. So and it's just, but you're stuck dealing with this, and you got to do what you got to do. I think the gameplay's fun. I think they streamlined a lot of things in ways that they should have. At the same time, I think some things are lacking. I don't think there's quite enough stats for the FCS area. Where are my gun arms? Where are my weapon arms at? Where are my old school extensions at?
Yeah, I'm with you on the weapon arm things. I miss them too.
I'm sorely missing those. But besides that, it's all really good. The variety is really good. The parts are good. The customization is as good as it's ever been. I haven't done a lot of PvP yet, so my only comment on that is the lack of crossplay. I think that's it. That's it. It's a great game. Unlike these guys who had played Armored Core off and on since the last one, I had not touched an Armored Core game since I stopped playing for a day. So getting back into it, so much of it felt so much like it used to, while at the same time, so much of it felt new in a way that I think it should have.
Mhm.
And I've appreciated the experience. I'm looking forward to really digging into PvP. They got to fix that crossplay. That's ridiculous. I mean, it's on every system. We should all be able to play each other. Oh, except for the Switch, but whatever. Well, I mean, whatever. It is what it is. Yeah, 8 out of 10. Great game, great experience. If you are an Armored Core fan, you should enjoy this. You should have a lot of fun with it. Yeah, I think that's it. That's it for me until we start debating stuff.
Alrighty, guess I'll bring up the tail end here. To kind of play off what you said a second ago, Tearsin, I actually put that in my review, my initial review, is that the way I describe this game, it's, you ever have one of those dreams where you're reliving a memory from your past, and in the dream, and there's things that are different in the dream that you know aren't accurate to what actually happened, but despite the fact that there's those differences, the dream still feels very familiar to you. So that's kind of how I relate Armored Core 6. So it's very much properly in the vein of a proper Armored Core sequel, while at the same time bringing in a lot of new gameplay mechanics that don't seem completely out of place. They changed a lot of stuff in this game compared to previous titles, yet somehow it feels more like third gen Armored Core than 4 or 5 ever did, while still managing to change a bunch of things from the previous titles. So it's actually kind of brilliant they were able to change that much, yet still make it feel like I'm playing like Nexus or Last Raven again. Like that's an incredible achievement in and of itself. So I guess I'll give my pointage here myself. I'm going to be probably the highest one here. I'm giving it a 9.5 out of 10.
Eller.
It's not quite perfect. Now, I have a lot of PvP time in this game now, a lot of it, and I think my pointage on the game is somewhat skewered by the community involvement that I've had in the last couple weeks. That kind of brings it back. So I'll get to that later. So to go through the main touch points, story's great. If I could point one thing on the story specifically, you do get more choices. You get even to the second new game plus. It's even more choices, and it's awesome. And can I just say something about the voice acting in this game? There is so much. These people are dripping with character. There's so many people in this game that have such good character to them. Some of the best character we've seen. I mean, they've always had the kind of the crazy people, the people you remember from previous games. But in this one, like, you have some people talk about, Rusty, you have Carla, you have Walter themselves, you have all the different people from Balaam. You have all the different people from Arquebus. Like, there's so much character in the individual people. The voice actors were on point for this. Armored Core has always had a certain level of cheesiness and over the topness to their characters and their storytelling and to their voice acting, and this fits in perfectly. So story, great. Music, I agree too. It is very atmospheric. It actually got to the point where sadly, I wasn't even hardly noticing the music. I can honestly say I barely noticed the music except for two places. One, the Ice Worm fight, I noticed it. And then the two instances at the end of chapter 4, trying not to do too bad of spoilers, where Rusty comes in. and it plays Rusted Pride, the track called Rusted Pride. Yeah,
Yep.
that one was very. I'm like, ooh, this track is different. So I noticed that one right away. So yeah, overall, I think music is a little lackluster compared, but atmospheric wise, though, I think it is very atmospheric. So I think it sets the tone properly. But I agree with Tearsin. There's no real good fun tracks that kind of help balance it out a little bit. Um, Gameplay wise, I love the gameplay. This is probably my favorite gameplay of all the games. Like I love the gameplay in this game. Melee feels so good. Like Melee feels so amazing in this game. Um how weighted and how weighty all the weapons feel. Like especially like grenade launchers feel like I'm literally launching a giant thermonuclear explosion at somebody. Is how it feels when I shoot those things at someone, which is a great feeling to have. Um it's yeah, gameplay wise, the way the movement works, I feel like it's a really good blend of third, fourth, and fifth gen as far as how the game feels, as far as movement goes. It's perfect. Yeah, gameplay wise, probably some of my favorite. Gameplay mechanics, movement, again, just mentioned that. Mission layout, I love the mission layout. I love the bigger, more expansive maps. I love the fact that you can approach missions so differently. Keynote for those who don't know yet, there's actually a lot of hidden, so somebody say hidden voice lines that you get depending on how you approach a mission. Like there's entire sections of the game where there's voice lines you completely miss if you just simply come into the mission from a completely different direction. Which is just like the fact that it even exists is amazing. So yeah, mission layout, love it. Stagger, I think Stagger is a even being brand new mechanic to Armored Core, it doesn't feel out of place. I feel like they basically just took heat. They took heat out of the game and said, "Here, have Stagger instead." That's kind of how it feels. What they did with the game, more or less.
Yeah.
It's a little, it's a little too strong. Which we can get the PvP discussion part of that. But I think it's a little too strong of an impact. But overall, I think it's a good fit. Design wise, I love. Dude, this game oozes third gen aesthetics. Oozes it.
Yeah.
And I
Yeah,
love
it's almost like a cut and paste.
yeah, dude, it oozes third gen. So, which third gen being my personal favorite of the design sets. So I have no complaints there. Aesthetic wise, great. The menu layouts, thank you. Like, can I get really close to my microphone for a second? Thank you so much from software, for how you designed the AC test arena. Like, for real, the fact you can go into assembly, press a button, go directly into the test arena, and then while in the test arena, you can go into assembly and change your parts live and test more things. That is the single largest quality of life improvement Armored Core has pretty much ever seen, in my opinion.
It's a big
Yeah.
QOL.
If that was in prior games, I'd have a year of my life back.
Yeah.
Exactly. So, I mean that is gigantic. So yeah, layout wise, well, couldn't do better. Customization, I suck at it. Always have. It's not now when I say customization, I don't mean like the variety of parts and things you can build. There's all kinds of builds you make of the game. When I think customizations, I think like paint schemes and emblem creation and logo creation and all the crazy build art people have already. I mean, literally, if you go to the Armored Core Reddit, which is a strange place, it's literally 90% just people like, here's this cool AC I made with all these cool decals that make it turn it into Squirtle. Like that's literally what it's turned into at this point. And it's just like it's insane. So yeah, no. 9.5 out of 10. My gripes are a little bit with the music. Stagger being a little too strong, and I agree with Tearsin, the lack of crossplay is a little bit killer for me too.
Oh, it's just there's no good reason. No good reason.
There isn't.
All right, so there you have it. You have the reviews of Armored Core 6 from the Armored Core Legacy staff members. So next thing we're going to talk about here are going to be our additional topics. So this is pulled from the community, basically what we've seen. Some of these are talking points that have been around since the start, and some of these are a bit newer, but we're going to sort of touch on everything, single player, multiplayer, and then some of the more general stuff. So the first one that I have on my list here is Armored Souls. AC6's direction for the series and a critique of the soul and spirit of Armored Core. So I'm going to go ahead and get this started off. Way back at the start, and we're talking, let's say around the time of the June event, then also that first gameplay footage trailer. It's the one where they didn't have the HUD on it. There were some murmurs in the community about the fact that they felt, based on what was shown, that instead of being Armored Core, it was Armored Souls. So basically, Souls with the skin of Armored Core basically on top of it. That has kind of died down quite a bit, but there, especially in July and August, that issue came up again. So I just want to open this up for discussion for the whole team. What is Armored Core 6 in comparison with the other previous games? And, what makes it not Armored Souls / Dark Souls?
You should have given me a trigger warning before you started that. You said that so many times in a short period of time. My blood pressure was going up a couple ticks every time you said it. Stop it. Literally, every time you said it, my blood pressure went up.
Let me go first on this because I think I might have the least to actually add to this because I've not played a Souls game. I've got Elden Ring. I haven't touched it. So I can only answer half of this, which is that how it feels in comparison to prior Armored Core games. Obviously, they spent a lot more time working on bosses in this one, which is good because the vast majority of Armored Core games and their bosses were. I'm sorry, I was going to say a different word I shouldn't be saying because we're supposed to keep it a little more family friendly tonight. Pushovers. I'll say pushovers, with the exception of with the occasional game where they had a genuine good tough boss. Most of them were pushovers. Most of those that weren't were very gimmicky, but at the end of the day, I found that most of these bosses were very gimmicky too. There wasn't much going through the game that I couldn't defeat. If I couldn't defeat it with my main AC that I was using on missions, I could just grab my tank. And if my tank couldn't get him with his basic build, I just had to swap out a couple weapons, and then I'd get it in a try or two after that. Although I do appreciate the fact that difficulty for bosses was ramped up, at the same time, it really felt like more of the same for Armored Core. And there wasn't much of a hurdle here. I had heard so much about, especially from the developers that they focus so much on difficulty and making the bosses so much tougher, and in that respect, it was going to be Souls-like, which is what a lot of Soul games are famous for. I was kind of looking forward to pulling my hair out, and I kind of never did. And that's my take.
What you're saying is you're just too good, Tearsin. Is what you're saying.
I'm not saying that. I'm not saying that, but I'm saying there wasn't much that took very long for me to figure out and get down.
Oh no, I gotta agree with you on that sense, because anyone who was familiar or had put plenty of hours into playing Armored Core, as long as you went at the proper mindset as far as like building or designing or piloting around what you're looking at, you could figure it out. You just could, just as a general whole.
Right.
Now, when it comes to that sort of style of bosses, and let's say even general gameplay, is that something you think that Armored Core should continue pursuing moving forward, or is this something where, whether we get a DLC or AC 6.5, it should be splitting from a different direction, or, finding a hybrid approach? Because I know it's definitely something that, especially when you listen to the new players, that's definitely a big source of frustration, especially like bosses like, Balteus, Ibis, from the Reach the Convergence, and sort of so on and so forth.
I think Z should probably talk this a little bit, because I know you loved Elden Ring.
Yeah.
I can also say that I have never. I only have 20 minutes into a single Souls game total. So
Sure.
I can't speak too much to that aspect of it, but I think you probably could.
So my feelings on this, and just for background, I've completed Elden Ring, Sekiro. I'm currently working on Bloodborne. And of course, this leads naturally to AC6, thinking, where are we sitting as far as the soul space for things and that famous, difficulty for boss challenge. I could definitely say doesn't feel like there's anything in AC6 that's like last boss of Sekiro level yet. But the thing that comes to mind for me about bosses in particular, and where we sit in this concept Armored Souls, given Cleric PTSD here, is destroy massive MT. And I say that because I think things circle back to that mission. In a lot of the old Armored Core games, there was a mission aptly titled what I was just mentioning, where there's some kind of massive MT or some kind of crazy weapon you destroy. Usually it's bristling with missiles or some kind of heavy weapon, but you can go around and figure out a good pattern or two and go ahead and knock it out. But the presence of an enemy like that and the change of tone in the mission is always felt. That's always a really big, exciting mission. I feel like we get that at like the end of every chapter in AC6. There's that big like destroy massive MT is what it feels like. Just because of the gameplay system, especially the ability to tweak your build at checkpoints if you want. If you hit 0 AP and if you want to actually make some tunes right there and some changes, you can change on the spot and just approach differently. Maybe it's a different approach in your piloting or whatever it is, or you can actually kind of stick to your guns and kind of stay generally with the type of build or the leg type that you're trying to go with. But as far as that idea, I really don't feel that there's going to be anything that'll push you to that level of just pull your hair out, because unlike the Souls games, Armored Core has always been a series that gives you different tools to address the problem. And just my opinion from the short range I've had, because I haven't played Dark Souls or Demon Souls, etc. But in Elden Ring, there's a degree of customization to your build, to your stats. You can use your strength build, for example, or if you're going to be using great swords, or if you're going to be more of a dex build, if you're going to be running a bleed build. I can go on and on all day about those decisions. But in your approach, it's ultimately going to come down to what you do with your stats in a very RPG type of way, and what you're going to use with your build, and how you're going to do ice or whatever element you're going to end up accompanying that with, how much poise you have, you're going to get stance broken easy, things like that. With Sekiro, having even fewer options for customization. Really, Sekiro just coming down to you better be good enough to get through this. If you're good at parrying, you beat the whole game. It barely even matters. You barely have to have any health or any. That's actually a really cool thing about Sekiro's gameplay loop. But in the same hand, that's mind-breakingly difficult for a lot of players out there. So I think a strength Armored Core is always going to have, and I, in my opinion, I think From would tie themselves into a circle, trying to design an AC game that is quote unquote just mind-breaking Souls hard, because that's just not you'd have
Right.
to. I think you would have to reduce the options to such an insane degree to make an Armored Core game like that. By the end of it, I wonder if you eviscerate it so much if it's even Armored Core anymore. It's just not, So I think AC is always going to be outside of that identity. I like the presence the new bosses bring. Obviously, there's been some attention paid to design, either whether it's multiple phases, whether it's just like the style of boss, crazy style attacks, new wave things. There's some very new attacks here too, and that's fun. So spectacle, yes. But as far as ever for reaching a point where it's just, to the stars impossible, I don't think so. And I think there's always going to be that divergence. And as an Armored Core player going into Souls games, that was always my problem coming in first. I was thinking, wait, aren't there more solutions to this problem? And it's like, no, there aren't. You have to work with this, more limited pool of things. So.
Yeah, and one thing I want to bring up too is when it came to sort of those first comments and thoughts that we saw, I really felt that they were superficial and that they were only really targeting the top level stuff. Because From Software has sort of made it clear, especially when we did an interview with them, that Armored Core was to some degree or another going to incorporate elements of that other game series. That didn't mean it was going to overtake it. And obviously, that other series is wildly successful. To say that they didn't want to take anything at all from that because fans says, oh no, it's going to dilute this game, is sort of utterly ridiculous. And
No, I think they should.
yeah,
Yeah.
obviously don't pull everything over, but you take
Yeah.
what you think works and works well and bring it over. And I feel in some ways it has sort of improved things. So sort of to Tearsin's point before about bosses, most of them are pretty easy. In Armored Core 6, the difficulty in terms of how you have to approach bosses this time around is a little bit different. But I do think it's a good direction to start, because it feels like there were just too many cases where either the boss was going to be too easy or it's going to be stupid hard. And we're talking 9-Ball Seraph. when it comes to that particular enemy unit, can you read the strategies? Yeah, definitely. Can you dodge the attacks? Definitely. But like, it's not the same way that you would have to do it in Dark Souls. It's because
Right.
its attacks are pretty much instant, and even though it has, um, a particular way of doing it, a pattern, it's not meant to be read that way. So this feels like it does give some direction in terms of how they need to move forward with certain pieces of the game. Again, this one specifically referencing on how they do bosses. Doesn't mean they need to stick to it, like how they did in this game. I definitely feel there's more that they can add to it, but like, to really sum it up, it's why you don't really hear that argument anymore. Because really, even though it has pieces of that other game, it's not a Dark Souls game. It's not Armored Souls.
Yeah.
It's Armored
Right.
Core with bits and pieces of other games.
Well,
I mean,
I think
go ahead. Go ahead.
I was going to say, I think Zealous said it right. I mean, the whole point of Armored Core is that they give you the tools that you need.
Mm-hmm.
It's they literally, you've got a whole box of parts. You just got to put it all together and get it done.
Yep.
I mean, that's
Right.
that's literally what the game is.
And not only that, why wouldn't you take your last decade of successful game design and not learn from it, and then apply what you've learned to a new game? Like, why would you not do that?
Yep.
Right.
So I mean,
Well,
that's kind of silly.
I do, before release, especially the first half of the year, going what they announced it at the very end of December last year, and like going for about half a year after that, I think it was a genuine, real concern though too, because what little that we had heard from software at the time was that they were, AC6 was going to be focused on single player.
We've talked.
I mean, if you start saying that Armored Core is going to be a focused single player experience, that's just weird to us, because the single player experience is the warm up. That's
Hey.
For your breakfast, that's the toast. That's not everything else. So it's gonna
It's
like,
not your eggs
you're
and
gonna
bacon.
focus that, right? So it was kind of weird. For a long time, we were like, what does this really mean?
Going with that idea too. There's so far you can take single player. I know there's a little fear about, or they're not going to do any multiplayer, or are they just going to really tone it down to a point where it's not really a thing. I mean, no, it definitely still is, most certainly. But I think it's definitely single player to the degree where there's enough scale to bosses where they just feel a little bit more like, instead of slightly stronger attacks than you'd see from other MTs. Yeah, they're more involved. Yeah, there's more things happen in stages, but I think that's a purposeful choice.
So when it comes to Armored Core 6, then, like, we have a lot of new people coming into the community. This is something where there's a lot of people who have played Armored Core, but there's also a lot of people that haven't. If you heard, that sort of discussion about, is this, Armored Souls or not, what would you say is like the one thing you would point to say, hey, this is Armored Core?
Just show them the garage.
Just the garage.
Just
Yeah.
seriously, show them the garage. Show them the assembly. Show them the advanced stats in the assembly, and then after you do that, go into the test arena and
Yep.
just load up a test AC and have them play for 5 minutes. Like, this is definitely not Dark Souls. Like, 5 minutes of gameplay tells you that's not what it is.
Yep. Now,
I'd agree.
Now, that sort of leads me to my next point then. So, Armored Core 6 is sort of the starting point of sort of the rebirth of Armored Core. It's brand new. It's not tied to any of the previous games. It's a reboot. Now that you've seen how they've sort of executed things in Armored Core 6, do you have any concerns on like the direction that they could move with Armored Core 6.5, Armored Core DLC, or even, let's just say, the next Armored Core patch? Because the first two patches we've had so far, those have been single player focused and also bug fix focused. But like, in terms of direction, where do you see it moving, and do you have any concerns about it?
All right, so it's kind of hard to know. So they already mentioned after like literally, like, was it 4 hours after they got done with the first patch, they released that press release saying, "Hey, we are looking to balance PvP soon, right? Here's the thing, though. You know this probably better than anyone else, Cheng, because you spent a lot of time in Japanese servers in previous games.
Mhm.
I know you've been trying to do it with this one, too. They play the game very differently from the Western audiences.
Yep.
Very, very differently. So what they consider being too good or overpowered or not good enough or needs buffing or needs adjusting towards being more usable, it's probably going to be fairly different from what we on the Western side of the world may play and say like, hey, no, this is what's the problem. Here's what needs buffed. Here's what needs nerfed. Like that's the kind of thing we'll see. So my only concern is, which has always been my concern, and honestly, rightfully so, because I don't think it was ever really adjusted that way properly, is that my concern is that they're going to adjust it for the Japanese audience and not necessarily take into account the gameplay audience of the rest of the world and what that'll translate into for as far as balance goes.
Right.
Because in all honesty, PvP wise, the game has its flaws balance wise, but there's not, because so how many part bans were there back in Silent Line?
Outright
Anyone know?
bans for events.
Yeah.
I know MG800 and Crow, and depending on the tournament, OpI.
Yeah.
Those were, I mean, because it was technically a part by that point. Those were the big three that usually stood out.
So the funny thing is, in this game, yeah, you have the Zimmermans, which they do need some adjustment. You have the apertive hand missiles. But the funny thing is, what people are actually having the biggest issues with, in all honesty, is the changes to assault boost, or what you used to call overboost, and also the changes to generator workings. So if anyone saw like the week 1 tournament that the AC Discord ran, the winning one ended up being double coral missile, double apertive hand missiles on a float tank that literally had infinite energy in the air and never touched the ground. Like, we haven't seen that in how long? A build like that, really, in Armored Core that could do that?
Yeah.
Like that?
Ancient design.
Yeah, exactly. It kind of breaks the rest of the what they called the word they used was aggression, was their terminology they used for the game. And it kind of breaks that a little bit. And since it breaks that a little bit, my single biggest concern is that are they going to adjust the game to make all the parts more viable? Or are they going to adjust the game that better fits their mantra for what they want the game to play like?
Right.
Because if they just going to do it based on what they want to play like,
balance?
yeah, PvP balance. If they're gonna do that, what's that gonna look like?
Right. And you know what, that actually does lead into our next two topics. So the first one's going to be the concept of difficulty, and for this one we're going to mainly stage for single player, and then the next one, which is speed, cover, range, and energy and parts balance, that'll be more PvP focused. Focused. So for difficulty, you've seen the reviews, you've seen the memes. You know, a lot of people at the very start in the first few days got filtered by the helicopter and also the Balteus. You know, it was almost hilarious because you would see the Armored Core Reddit, and basically every day there'd be like a dozen different posts about, you know, this boss is BS. This, I can't believe they have this in the game. Worst game ever sort of deals. But I think that only touches on one facet of it. So at the very start of the game, there's a high difficulty just because, one, you're playing the game for the first time, whether you're a new Armored Core fan, or sorry, an old Armored Core fan or someone who's brand new, and you have a limitation on parts. And then some of the other difficulty in the game is as you get further on, they have more of that other game sort of style of boss battles where they have these overwhelming strengths, but large like windows of vulnerability. But then you also have things such as missions where even though you have these larger maps, they're not necessarily harder. There's a lot of situations where you can go with long stretches where there's only a few small empty enemies, or even like a fairly weak mini boss. So for this topic, what I want to talk through is when it comes to Armored Core, what does the team feel is the general difficulty level of Armored Core 6? And really, where does that stand? Is that something where it's good? Is that something that really needs to be, adjusted to be harder or easier? What are the team's thoughts there?
It's a
Right.
good one.
Go ahead.
Tearsin, you want to go? Go ahead.
I was just going to say, I think honestly, at the end of the day, this game is not on a single player mode. It's not any more difficult than some of the others.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I would say, with probably the exception of bosses, when you run through them the first time, it is a lot easier because, you know, going back to what I said before, wide open spaces, but enemies are fairly sparse when you consider the size of maps. And the bosses, they have a visual and audio indicator when they're going to hit you with the heavy weapons. And they also have,
Yeah.
pretty big windows of, end lag. So, all things considered, it's on the scale of difficulty. It's not that bad, or at least it doesn't feel
No,
that bad.
That red gun. If I don't know if you played or not, you guys have played through yet. That red gun mission.
The one at the
Which
very
one?
end.
Did you guys do that one? The end of chapter 4, the red gun mission. Did you pick
Oh
that
yeah.
route?
Oh shoot. Yeah. I found out how difficult that was. I'm like, this is the one I'm doing.
No.
It's all right. Yeah. Me and Michigan, we worked it out.
Have you?
No, but that's the fun of it, right? I mean, that's what you do. I don't know. There's so, especially because gaming is so much bigger. Armored Core has always been a niche game, and obviously it's bigger than it's ever been. People approach games different ways. I mean, for me, it's like, you want to use this cool weapon, you want to use this cool part, you want to use this cool, the legs or whatever. Yeah, but if it's not working, it's not working. Put it away.
Right.
Grab something else.
So to sort of to that point too. So Armored Core Last Raven, almost universally known to be like the most difficult Armored Core game.
Yeah.
Moving
Which one?
Armored Core
Last Raven.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Would you say like that's something that From Software would sort of move forward with in terms of that level of difficulty, or is this something where they just need to sort of balance it out across the board?
I wouldn't say that like LR was needed, or at least that level of it, because here's why I say that. I'm going to put an asterisk by that. LR was important for its era and where it fell because it marked the end of not just the PlayStation 2 era, but the end of the AC3 era, which had gone on long and which we were so accustomed to at that point. So it was more of a culmination game than just a single rogue entity out of nowhere. And I think that's why it felt more special and why that difficulty stood out. It made sense. And that's always why I was fine with it. I say, hey, if this is truly the end of third gen, go out with a bang, make it crazy, make it awesome. And sure enough, there you had it. What is it, about something crazy like over 10 years of Armored Core represented in one game. That's why LR is still masterful in my opinion. It's why it's one of my favorite AC games ever. And that's why I'm so happy to be talking about AC6 on that part. But no, I don't think that if you're just aiming, well, let's just be like LR because it was hard. Well, no, you have to look why. And I think if they're going to go forward with the direction of AC6, the way they wanted to just design that, it's got. I think having that balance of cool, spectacle, space age, crazy stuff you could do. This is almost the most freedom, in my opinion, AC has had since 2. 2 was the last time I remember some very alien designs, introducing the idea of like Phobos moon, like really just crazy out there things like. When AC gets spacefaring, you have room to do that kind of thing. And there's just little things put in the game that I just love, like all the way deep in the emblem creation system. There's some of the text, like you could put in like your emblem. It's like what is it, like sealed for vacuum combat or something? Like I'm just like that's just sick. My hope is that From don't get too heavy-handed. Well, let's nerf this down into the ground, or just try to totally rebalance and force play to be a certain way. And that's difficult, right? Because the Western base and also the Japanese base have always been sort of separate. I think it's an approach that From can kind of go forward because, like you said, AC is so huge now. It's the largest it's ever been, and I think they are going to have to take that larger consideration into the pile, like how they watched Elden Ring and other games. So,
and now that that actually. Now that you mentioned the bit, that actually brings up another question for me. So you've seen in 1.02, they did make some minor adjustments to some of the bosses.
Yeah.
And particularly, it seemed to be targeted for when players play through the first time, which is again where they don't have quite all the parts. They may not be as familiar with the mechanics,
Mhm.
but they didn't really give us anything else. So if you were doing new game plus plus plus, it really just meant you had an easier boss to deal with. Do you feel like they should have added anything else, like a new game plus, like the other series does, or like an alternate mission path that was harder? Because it feels like for those of us who played through the game already, that sort of hurt replayability with that lower difficulty.
Yeah. Personally, I didn't, and this isn't this isn't me just coming from the get good scrub perspective. It's more just I don't think that adding a maybe additional mission path or so or it should have quite been for AC. Maybe I'm too much of a traditionalist. When I think of new paths opening up, to me that screams AC expansion space. E.g. the Armored Core 6 Fires, well, this Fires of Rubicon, whatever they call an expansion if that were the case, or a DLC. But no, in the same hand, that's kind of an anathema to me. I can think of other uh, difficult yet optional things like early Margit is a great example. I should say the Omen King, because there's he's kind of a filter, right? And he's really the first boss that kind of tests how familiar are you with mechanics. Can you dodge roll successfully? You kind of know how your iframe works. Are you maybe you're running like the buckler build and you can do parries? How good are you at catching your critical hits to those windows? It's the first boss to really test that, and I know that really pressed players a lot early on. But people learn those patterns and they eventually push through it. Yeah, it's kind of daunting and overwhelming at first, but that kind of made me tilt my head, and I I do understand the outcry about Alteus, but again, there's those options in AC that there's so many more ways to deal with that problem than you could like in an Elden Ring or that you could in a Dark Souls. I know myself, for example, when I first time through it, I looked at it and said, I don't want to approach this with the fruit bowl attacks. Pulse seems to be doing a good job against a shield. Okay, I'm just going to grab 2 pulse guns and I'm going to grab 2 missile launchers, and I'll kind of control when I burst down a shield, and I'll try to control things from there. That worked for me. Maybe that doesn't for others. Maybe that approach sucks elsewhere. But I think that's part of the fun of AC. Swimming through that. But no, I would not have expected new missions and paths that early. I really think From would sort of be grasping at straws just to try to throw that much content early on. I think there's a good amount of things to enjoy already story wise, and I don't think they should have been pressured to put new missions out per se. But yeah, uh, early balance patches. I personally expect parts, if anything, to be looked at. Different stats, different stat lines, and stuff like that. I'm always surprised if things go as far as like actually toning down a boss or something like that.
Yeah. Yeah. I have to say, I don't know about adding new missions that early on.
Right.
Although I mentioned this earlier, one of my bigger complaints is that you don't have, it was always a thing in prior Armored Core games, and most Armored Core games, especially ones that were mission heavy, where you'd pick a mission and then take a mission or two off the board. You did a mission
Mhm.
for a company, and now the other company's like, screw that, he's working for them. I don't want to give him jobs. There wasn't much of that, and early on, I think that would have been cool to see more of that. But earlier on in this game, and I know Zealous, I mentioned this to you a couple times. I was very frustrated with the gatekeeping that this
Yeah.
game had
Yeah.
as far as parts in general. The first couple chapters, there's not a lot of choices, especially when it comes to different leg types. And
Right.
even here at the end of the game, there's still not a lot of choices in different leg types.
No,
And
there aren't.
that's a bit frustrating, but I think there should have been a wider, like I said, you got your box of parts, and in there's a solution, but early on, there's not so much to choose from. And I think
Right.
that's so that people don't get confused.
Right.
But at the same time, I think there wasn't as many options in there as there should have been.
Right. 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 And I think had you been, given those options, that at least lends itself to weight classes. I was honestly shocked, not early game, at least seeing different weight classes of each leg, tanks excluded. Most of the time in an Armored Core, you have a lightweight version or two of a type of leg, a medium weight version, and maybe the text might mention as such, or you can see it from the stats. What denotes that is usually it'll have like heavier load capacity, maybe a little more armor, a little more AP, maybe a little more stability. Maybe it'll perform worse in the mobility department, things like that, than a heavy or super heavy type of leg. That happens for bipeds, for quads / tetrapods, for reverse joints, but really didn't see that as much. I mean, there's, for example, myself being a quad fanatic, I'm just kind of sitting here in the corner crying a bit. There's one quad leg forever. And finally, the Balaam quad opens up, which is a cool leg, by the way. The style of it reminds me a bit of my good old Lizard favorite Mirage leg from back in the day, or the Knot leg from Silent Line, if you guys know what I'm talking about. But that was sorely missed. That's sorely missed to me. And I've always thought part of the fun of AC is having those different weight classes of legs, and sometimes getting a surprise. In games like Ninebreaker, just because you used a heavy leg didn't mean that you were a slow AC. In fact, underweighting your AC on purpose made you weigh faster. The underweighted FA biped legs, you guys probably know what I'm talking about. You guys remember all the way back that far. It was crazy. You could keep up with lightweights at that point and just put the right booster and everything on you, and you were in good shape. But that's another one of the interesting things about Armored Core. And that's another difference even. We were talking about the whole comparison to Souls. When you put on a heavy piece of armor or that has a lot of poise or helps, protect your balance and stability, like in an Elden Ring, right? That's a heavy weight consuming part. There's no, but if I strip everything else down, I'll be faster. Armored Core is so unique in that facet. I mean, that's one of the many things that I think it does that distances itself from other games in the From category. So to me, it's just weird seeing them do so much with weapons, but then go away from that essential part to frames. I don't know what to say about that.
Yeah, nobody needs that many options in middleweight biped legs in comparison to the rest.
Man.
So going back to difficulty too, we're going here a little bit. The difficulty comes in part selection somewhat too, but going into the missions. So after I got through my playthroughs and I was doing some other stuff, working on other things, I actually have popped into quite a few Twitch streams of just random people playing Armored Core 6.
Yeah.
Just to see what they were doing, to see what was happening. A lot of them were getting filtered, so to speak. Either a Balteus or the helicopter at the beginning, or so a lot of people got stuck on the Sea Spider. A lot of people got stuck on that one.
Sure.
And I was looking at it, and I was looking at some of them, and so I usually just kind of watch it. I try not to backseat drive too much, but I noticed quite a few people were not using the additional context menu or the advanced stats page.
Mm-hmm.
They just weren't. I'm like, hey, do you know about there's more things to look at than what you're looking at? He's like, well, what do you mean? So I type out, like, if you look at your key code down there, press that button. Like, yeah. They're like, oh, like there's a button at the bottom of your menu that says for advanced stats, like press this button to look at it. And a bunch of people just weren't looking at it. And then once they got in there, I blew their minds once I said, here, do contextual help. We're like, oh, this changes everything. I'm like, okay, I understand that this is a new game for a lot of people. I understand that you're menuing something for the first time you've never played Armored Core before. Honestly, the advanced help text stuff is new stuff for us too, for the most part, as far as the way it works in this game specifically. But that being said, like you joked about, get good. I'm not going to say get good.
Right.
No, I want you to get better at the game, obviously. But what I want to say it said is learn the game.
Yeah.
Like, do not come into this as assuming like, oh, I'm a gamer, I got this.
Right.
Like, this is From Software you're talking about it's infamous for difficulty. And you think you're just going to approach this game and just go like, I strap on guns, I go pew pew, I win. That's not going to get you very far for the most part. Maybe you luck out with your build type and it works good for you. But in the game, half of the difficulty of Armored Core has always just been understanding how the mechanics work. That's half the difficulty. It's not just the bosses, it's not just the parts, it's not just the mission design layout, or even talking about PvP. Half of the difficulty is having a good mental grasp of all the mechanics and then maintaining those mechanics on a constant fluctuating basis in the middle of a fight. That's
How
half the
much is that?
difficulty of AC.
How much of that did you actually see, Claire? Did you see a lot of that?
No.
I mean, I can't imagine. Literally, the first thing I did when I got into the garage and I started looking at guns and body parts and such, and I'm just like, all right, where are my numbers? Where are
Yep.
my stats? As
Yep.
literally the first thing I looked for.
Yep. And all these people who are brand new to Armored Core, almost none of them were doing it.
Because it's one of those things where it's, Armored Core is a sort of that breed of game where that sort of, complexity being shown to you is sort of, it's less common. So
Yeah.
I'm
not too surprised to hear that you had a lot of people coming in and just not paying attention to that. That's
Well, that's what I don't get though. So I went in and I watched some of the videos online, like the Unga Bunga builds, as people call it, which I think is a great name, by the way. I think it's hilarious. I love the fact that it's called that. I think
Yeah.
it's amazing it's called that. But I'll look at what they do, and then like before they go into a boss fight, right? It's like I'm gonna do this spell. I'm gonna pop this aura. I'm gonna pop
Hmm.
this potion. I'm gonna do this cooldown. And I'm watching these people buff themselves for a full 2 minutes and then walk into a boss fight, skip the cutscene, and then like two-shot the boss, right?
Right. Right.
And I'm like, okay, you're gonna go as far as to go to that level of length of knowing exactly how to pre-prep your character to go in and one or two shot this boss in 7 seconds, but you can't be bothered to read the stats on a page for 5 seconds. It's like when soon as people got guns put in their hands, like half of half of their analytical side just kind of went out the window a little bit. It seemed like it's like no, this game, it's still a From Software game. You still have to pay attention to how the game works.
And I think it's important. This definitely doesn't come from any kind of perspective of just, well, we're just you're exceptional, or we're just, you're a veteran, you're just excused from things. No, absolutely not. I mean,
No,
you can. I was just saying earlier. I mean, we did the first demo. I was thrown off all kinds of ways from this, and getting used to it was really odd. You're gonna have that curve, but in the same hand, I think it's accepting that and knowing that AC doesn't require you don't have to bash your head against the wall the same way 60 times, or just
no, you don't.
get a lucky run, or just, oh well, the boss one shot at me because I lined up things wrong. I just need a better run, guys. Just need to dodge better. Just need a better iframe. No, you can. There's tools to that. Just take a second. Just go check things out, because and I really think, not just from fans, but a lot of people aren't used to uh, that kind of contextual menu like that. Most of the time, it's just, okay, well, I got my stuff. I guess I'll just go beat my head against this until something cracks.
Well, that's the great thing about the game though too though. Like, so say you really deep dive for the bosses, right, to figure them out and beat them.
Right.
That same mentality in Armored Core in the PvE end is gonna help you immensely in the PvP end.
Oh yeah.
Like if you deep dive how the game works to figure out the game to beat the bosses and speed run or whatever it may be, to get really good at the game, those things will translate into PvP.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
So you're not just learning a boss mechanic for a single boss. Like, you are somewhat, but in all reality, the things you learn to beat that boss are going to carry with you the entire rest of the game time you play.
Right. Oh, couldn't agree more.
Fundamentals.
okay. So in that case, I think we've covered pretty much most of this topic. The next one is going to be in regards to basically concepts that have changed quite a bit with Armored Core 6. So we have speed, cover, range, and energy. And you can also feel free to talk about parts balance here, this or the next topic, because they'll be sort of combined. So what I want to go through right here is sort of talk about the team's opinion on the adjustments that have been made to these. And this is actually something where I'm going to start it. So
Sure.
I just want to say right off the bat, when we went to the event in July, one thing I really liked about the first missions we saw for the single player was that it was slower paced. It was slower paced. The maps were big, but you also had a lot of cover to use. One thing that I disliked when it started to come to the later game, and then also once people started to get really good at the game, particularly in the PvP, is how a lot of that went out the window. So first one is cover. First few maps that you play through, pretty good with cover. And then as you start to proceed on, you get to maps where there's either no cover or there's cover, but you don't really fight enemies where you really need to use that. Or you have very little cover and it's not really super useful. And then that on top of the speed changes and also the energy changes. So this is where energy, instead of always constantly recovering, once you use any part of your meter, your energy meter, it starts recovering. It stops recovering, or if you bottom out completely, you're out of energy for a short period of time. Similar to in older games, but it's instead of like 20 seconds, it's like 1 to 3 to 5 seconds. So those are some changes in these that I didn't like because it felt like it pushes people even more than what the game already pushes you for, to be like a super tanky or a hyper aggressive build. Because if you don't do one of those two, you don't do super well. And then also adding to the fact that range is super close, those sort of stuff combined, you don't quite play as cautiously as I would say you should. Now, obviously, there's going to be builds where you play aggressive, you play safe, but I feel like, especially with how all these factors combine together, there's a huge skew on each of the ends and not a lot of midpoints.
Agreed.
No, it's a pretty comprehensive statement, man. I mean, as far as adding to it, I actually want to see if we want to take some of those ideas, Cheng, if we want to narrow those down into one specific avenue. You want us to kind of talk to a little bit first, or do you want to cover a couple of main sections of that?
No, I think we can start to break it down. Where do we want to start here, team? What do you feel most strongly about?
Range.
Range. Yep, that's a big one.
Yeah.
Fair. Good spot.
Definitely range.
Yeah, I think in Cleric, we probably are one of the handful of people that like got to hear it first from Yamamura and Ogura during our interview, but they seem to really nail home that they want you to play close and they want you to play hard. And basically you can see in sort of the parts design or parts balance in the game, because most encounters I would say is like 300 meters or less, and most weapon ranges are for the most part within there. But then there's also this weird situation where you have missiles which have like 2,500 range, almost
unlimited range.
Yeah, almost arbitrarily. So it's like that's 7 to 8 times the range that you're normally playing at.
Yeah. That's part of the reason they got a 9.5 for me is the balance of this very thing. So yeah, your Gatling gun is plinking at 300 meters.
Mm-hmm.
So
I mean,
ricochet.
Honestly,
so,
300 is like being generous.
Max.
Yeah.
I'd say it's closer to the 150 mark, to be all honesty. I'd say probably half of all encounters are within the 150 meter mark, which that's close enough to do is almost like a single quick boost into a melee. Like that's how close that is. So range effectively doesn't exist in this game outside of super close range, like CQC a la MGS, like Metal Gear Solid style or some nonsense.
CQC.
Or CQC. Metal Gear.
Here.
Yeah, you have that. Or you have, wee I'm a missile boat, pew pew, run away. Like that's literally, there's no in between. So many different weapons need their bullet velocity turned up so much, it's insane. They need their bullet velocity turned way up, and they need their ricochet range turned way up. That way, they actually can be usable. Because as it is, even with the buff, they're still borderline unusable in the game.
I don't know how you fix this in 6. they were open and honest about this. This was a single player game first, and everything else is secondary. And that's something that we've all been, those of us who are
Yeah.
veterans of Armored Core, that's something that we've all been a little concerned about, because we know that is going to bring what is essentially the end game to Armored Core. That's going to bring a massive amount of imbalance, and that's what we're seeing. And I don't know if you fix that in this version. That might have to wait until an expansion comes out.
Yeah,
Right.
and this is where one of my concerns are, is like the way they've sort of designed the game, at least the vanilla version. They've sort of walked themselves into the corner. Like the easiest off the top head solution I would have is like you create specific weapons that are designed with high damage and low stagger. That's probably what's on most people's minds. But then the problem is what happens to the short range, and particularly what happens if you get staggered and get hit with a weapon which, a normal weapon is already going to do a high amount of damage once you're staggered. What's going to happen with the weapon that has almost pure damage, So
Right.
I
You
don't.
make it have a lower direct hit adjustment. That's the way you balance that out.
So that's one way to do it, but I feel like this may be where they have to shift sort of what they focus on when it comes to some of the concepts.
It's interesting.
I-
I from the perspective wise, I know, especially in Cleric, I think you and Cheng have probably had some of the most time in actual PvP here. Myself super busy with the relocation, a few other things. There's a few aspects I've missed out on that I don't want to talk to with full expertise yet, because I want to get some more hands on with it. But I think direct hit is something that we didn't have to consider as much before, and especially for those narrow windows when you do manage to land a stagger, and of course things do become direct hits. It's a major consideration, keeping the big stun combos going and everything like that. And this ties back to what we were talking about earlier about the potential for From to be, I think, too heavy-handed with that balancing and how you approach it. It's really easy to sling things, I think, further into that category of pigeonholed playing. My hope is that they stay away from that kind of inclination and still leave room for the sort of open customization and ideas to put parts forward. But it's got potential to go either way at this point.
I agree with what you were saying, Chen, earlier on. There's more of it, and it's more important earlier on in the game. I think energy feels really good. That has been hit or miss throughout the years, throughout the iterations and versions of Armored Core. I think in this game it feels really good, especially later on. You're getting better end generators. You're getting better parts. You can feel it.
Yep.
And the performance is obvious. And I think that's the way it should be. As you get more expensive and better things, your performance should be better. Speed. What do you mean by speed?
Just the
Is
general.
that just part of range?
No, just like the general pace of the game, how fast combat is, how short, how quickly you can close the distance, that sort of stuff.
Well, yeah, I think that's fine right now, but that's because everything's so close.
So let me ask you guys a question. So there's a debate right now about coral generators in the PvP space, especially.
Mhm.
The reason being, the thought process is with the regular energy resupply refresh versus the emergency energy supply recovery, correct?
Right.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
One where it's bottomed out versus one that's not bottomed out, right?
Mm-hmm.
Sure.
So people feel, and I can understand, one, the coral generators just have a ton of capacity, so you can boost for a long time.
Right.
Two, they have the cool red aesthetic, which makes you cooler, which is funny. I'm just kidding about that a little bit, but no.
Well,
Here's the
you're
red
not
aesthetic.
wrong.
But here's the thing. They feel like the coral generators, because they have such a massive energy supply recovery stat, that it quote unquote rewards sloppy gameplay. And you can basically be sloppy in your dodges and your quick boosts. And if you bottom out your energy, it'll recover so fast in such a vast amount that you're not necessarily punished for mismanaging your energy versus other ones. If you mismanage your energy, you're just screwed in comparison. So what do you think about that dichotomy?
So I'm gonna give probably a bit of an aggressive answer, and that is so what. So the thing with Armored Core is,
I agree with that. So what? Honestly, what's that lead to?
yeah. So I know where you're coming from, Cleric, and they're probably. I'm assuming that
Oh,
this
I'm
is.
not saying me. I'm just saying that's been talked about a lot. I'm not saying me personally.
Yeah. So I'm Cleric. I'm assuming that has to do with more PvP stuff, right? Or are they trying to?
Mostly,
Okay.
yes.
Yeah. So I know where you're going there, but really the answer is so what? One, Armored Core is a game with imbalance, and we already know that. So there's going to be some degree of weirdness, some degree of some stuff being a little bit too strong. But the other thing, too, is that ultimately it's up to the player to decide what they want to choose. I understand where they're coming from and why they're complaining about that. But ultimately, it's still just a part, and people should be able to use it. And regardless of how sloppy or not sloppy it makes you play, because that's more of a balance issue than anything else. So,
Yeah. Oh, go ahead.
oh yeah. So, and like what I assume, at least half of this is due to that missile build you were talking about earlier. But I've also seen the gameplay where people are playing, with that generator, and they are relying on the generator with its capabilities to sort of get through a match. But I don't feel it's so utterly overpowering that it cannot be overcome by another player, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
You know, and I'll say this right now because again, the game's only been out a month,
Yeah.
so for me, it's more testing, more testing, more testing. But from where I sit right now, I mean, I've had two AC builds really. I've got a middleweight reverse joint, and I've got a tank. I would not stick one of those coral generators in my tank. No way. I think that would be an inappropriate use. Um, but for the reverse joint, I'm using what this I forget the second one you get the one you get through the combat log,
Hmm.
and it's freaking great, freaking
Yeah.
great
Yeah.
generator. It's doing its job, but I would not stick that in my tank though. But so different parts for different builds.
Yeah, and maybe I know I sort of got a little bit off track there, but I think what it boils down to, if it's an issue, um, either From Software needs to deal with it, which I don't know if they'll do, or if the community needs to deal with it, so they need to ban it in tournaments. But really, beyond that, it sort of is what it is.
And some
Can
have already done that, Cheng.
Yeah.
Sorry, and yeah, not Dirk. I know Dirk Donk, a few other friends. They're like personal tourneys. I see those generators hitting the ban list. So
Yeah.
yeah,
You know
Oh,
what?
they're banning generators.
Yep.
Yeah.
We're in an era of Armored Core Tearsin where we're banning
Banning
generators. You are correct.
Yeah, this is not something I've really gotten into too much yet. But here, let me drop some truth for people. All right, let me drop some facts. Most Armored Core games have had one or two generators worth using.
Correct.
That's just kind of the way it's always been. Now,
Correct.
am I saying that's right? I'm not saying that's right, but I'm just saying that's the way it's been.
I can tell you this one. I think there's 5 or 6 that are great.
I think they're again more testing needed on this end, but some of them are pretty good. Some of them are like, oh, I can't wait till I get the next one.
You know what? That's an interesting point that you bring up, Cleric, and I'm going to tie this back to what Tearsin said a bit earlier. I'm not. Okay, it's a little frustrating because one thing I noticed is with the way that the energy formula is set up, it's harder to make a build that you can use with it. So, for example, I was theory crafting before this call here, basically with a heavyweight, and none of the parts were drainy. It's standard heavyweight parts, a lightweight core, and then I was using all energy, not energy, solid weapons. But the generator couldn't support it. And as I was going through the list, 50% of the generators couldn't support the build at all. And
Mhm.
in previous games, okay, it can't support it. You can still technically go into battle with that, but the game will actually prevent that. So if your EN recovery is too low, it just says, hey, you can't roll out with this build. So that's one thing I do wish they would change, because it feels like that's an artificial limitation that is narrowing the sort of number of builds that I could potentially create as a player.
Okay, so let me ask something. Kind of going off topic, or I don't know. Maybe we're going to start bleeding the community soon, or something like that. Because I have not been paying attention to the community scene this time around very much at all. Currently, or up to this point, and you just said that we're banning generators. What else is getting banned?
Zimmerman.
Funnily
I figured
enough,
Zimmerman. I mean,
uh,
I saw my mailman last week, and he said the Zimmerman's were OP.
all right, so the primary the bands you are seeing is choral generators. Not a lot of that yet, but there is some. The flat out bands are actually more what they call the quote unquote bugged items. Like for example, nebulas in PvP to the charge shot often doesn't register. So I mean, it doesn't register the animation, so it just hits you, and you don't ever see it hit you. So people are banning that because of the visual portion of it. And honestly, it's almost like a gentleman's ban thing a little bit. You can use Zimmerman, but you can't use two.
Dual.
Yeah,
That's
you
the
can
key.
use stun needle launchers, but you can't use two.
You need flashbacks to the bands and gentleman bands and all that crap.
Yep, that's literally what it is. Like
Classic.
it's big flashbacks. And the one part I'm seeing more and more just straight up banned is the coral missiles.
I haven't gotten those yet, so I'm not quite to that point yet. So I can't.
But no,
I've
actually,
seen them.
I was gonna tell you, Z, like the way people are functioning on these coral generators, it's like the old backdoor cooling in Nexus. Like no joke, it feels like that sometimes.
I mean, it sounds like the nebula. That makes complete sense. It's broken. Like it's literally broken. It's not working right. It's not that the stats are OP or something. It's literally not working right. That makes sense.
Oh, the other one is the Truenos. Truenos are only use one also.
What is that?
That's the super fast missile launcher.
Oh, and I know it was a joke, but the Zimmerman's right.
Yeah, you can use one usually.
Use one. I guess for me, in my perspective on this, because From has said there is a big PvP balance patch coming. They've said it. I would maybe wait until we start, giving parts the Scarlet Letter.
Yeah, I think people are pretty open to adjustments. I think in general.
I don't know.
Now, next we gotta go. Next we're getting the multiplayer though.
Yep. Yeah. So that's actually gonna be the next one on the list. So we're gonna talk about pretty much everything multiplayer related. I know this is something that not everyone has touched on, so I'm just gonna talk briefly, real quick, just to set the stage on what's offered with multiplayer. So once you get to, I think it's chapter 2, or is it chapter 3?
Yep, 2.
Once you get chapter 2, yep. You unlock Nest, which is basically the multiplayer. When it comes to multiplayer, it's pretty bare bones. So basically, for multiplayer, you have two options. You have 1v1 and you have 3v3s. But you can have 9 people in the room for both, and basically anyone extra is a spectator. 1v1s are best of 3, so once you initiate a match, you play up to 3 battles. And then that takes you back to the loading screen where you can start up again. And then when it comes to 3v3s, that actually changes to team deathmatch. So you basically fight 3 other ACs, and every time you die, you come back. Every time you die, depending on the condition, like how long you've been alive, or if you're a team leader, it changes how many points you get. And basically, at the very end, the points are tallied up, and that determines a winner or loser. There's 8 maps, I think, and you can set time anywhere from 2 to 10 minutes. So overall, pretty bare bones in comparison with even with what Verdict Day had. And you can't really make further modifications. So I mentioned before in the review, if you do a 3v3, it can only be a 3v3. So if you don't have 6 people in the room, tough luck.
Man, look, you're not wrong. You're not wrong when you say bare bones.
Yeah.
I mean, we used to do, I'm going to sound like an old man. We used to do so much with options, no bigger than that back in the day. People used to travel cross country for 1v1.
Yep.
No,
you're not wrong.
I guess if I were to complain, the option to switch. Well, yes, and we've already, we already said that no crossplay. That's BS. If I were to look at the current options, there should be a 2v2, and you should have the option to switch 3v3 to be point based or elimination. Um, that's look, yeah, we got 1v1 online here, people. I built the whole thing on the fact that it wasn't online years ago, along with Zealous after.
Yeah.
I think
We
part
did
of
a
it.
whole thing for
I think
years.
part of it though is like the the gaming landscape and the community has changed a bit. So it's like, and keep in mind, I would say this is not an Armored Core problem. This is more of a From Software problem, where they really are for those single player games with a handful of exceptions, and Zealous, I think you can attest with this with Elden Rings.
Mhm.
But like they really don't put a lot of energy into the multiplayer, so it's always like,
Oh no,
yeah,
that felt very Elden
Yeah.
Ring's PvP felt very secondary to the main story stuff.
yep. So this is like,
So what?
yeah,
Yeah, and I've only done a couple matches. From everything I've heard, it plays fine. The netcode's good.
yeah, it's pretty good
So
overall.
Mostly.
Yeah, I mean, obviously it's a From Software game, so there's still going to be issues, but like it's
and some of that might end
acceptable.
up being user issues too. Someone with
It
a bad
is.
connection, or someone from
It
the
is
other side of the
very
world, or
user
whatever.
internet dependent. Yeah,
Yep.
people with
Yeah,
potato
so-
internet, it's rough.
Yeah, so I honestly, and yeah, maybe I am just being an old timer from that. Maybe it is literally from the fact that I used to put together tournaments and I've traveled to tournaments.
With
I
your
remember
Firewire
talking about it.
hubs.
Yeah, I talked about it before the game came out. As long as we have a 1v1, I'm good. So I'm good.
That's
Now,
the soul.
and I will say this about crossplay, and I complained about the fact that there is no crossplay, and it is ridiculous. That is something they can fix at any time.
If they choose
That is
to.
true.
Yeah.
So that's not a problem they have to live with.
Aren't any of their games crossplay? Any of them? Not a one, right?
No, I don't think so.
I don't think so.
Mm.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
Yep. So
But
Cleric,
the infrastructure for this game is so old. They could do it. They could do it.
What are you gonna say, Cheng?
yeah. So sorry, I was gonna bring up. So when it comes to multiplayer, I think you played the most. Probably me second. Zealous, where do you sit on the scale there?
Probably third.
Okay, and then
Yeah,
Tearsin.
I've literally played 3.
Yeah. So I'm gonna rely on you for this a little bit on the state of PvP. So
Yeah.
let's start with 3v3s because I think that's the one I played the least, and then I'll open up to 1v1s, and then anything else after that. When it comes to PvP, first off, the state of PvP, how do you feel it is currently, and like what do you see in terms of build and strategies?
Let me say it now. 3v3 is chaotic fun. Like legitimately, the 3v3 is so fun. Like I wasn't expecting to like it as much as I do. It's legitimately enjoyable. Like even being stuck in the deathmatch format, which is a little bit unfortunate. I actually don't think the option of being a single elimination, so to speak, where everyone has their standard AP, once you get blown up, you're gone, because destruction is so fast in this game potentially
Hmm.
that I don't think it takes away from it too much, because it would just become a gank fest. Like, oh, everyone team up this one guy. Oh, everyone team up this one guy, which was the normal thing with team matches back in the day. But it'd be even worse in this one with stagger and stun being a thing. Like stagger that guy, blow him up. Like there have been 3v3 matches where I just respawned. I come in and I'm the only one alive, and I die in 3.5 seconds. Like that happens. That happens in 3v3. But there's a lot of madness in it, and honestly no one's taking 3v3 very seriously at all at this point when it comes to the competitive landscape of PvP. It's really just seen as fun, and legitimately it is a lot of fun. And all those people complain about parts bans and balances and all that stuff they have in 1v1s. There's nary a whisper about that when it comes to 3v3 because the game plays so differently. People who have weapons that do a massive amount of damage but have slower travel bullet velocity speed or other things are so more viable in 3v3 because you can just come from the side while someone else is focused on something else. Next thing you know, they get labeled with 2 grenade shots and they're half dead. Like that happens a lot in 3v3. You don't get that in 1v1 as much. So there's not as much talk of part banning and stuff in 3v3 because it's not as much of a balancing issue. So honestly, funnily enough, just by the sheer virtue of the fact that it exists, the way that it exists, 3v3 is pretty much okay in Armored Core 6. Not really much needs done to it.
I'm gonna throw in a dissenting opinion here, and maybe this is because I've been spoiled with sort of 5th gen, and that sort of team play. But I feel like it's too chaotic. Like I think I would have preferred like a 2v2, because with how a lot of the game is sort of positioned, with the fact that you can't really out of bound, how ridiculous some of the out of bounds are, and then also like where they've removed friendly fire, it feels like, for me anyway, again, I'm going to reiterate this. I played all through 5th gen from start to finish online and with the Japanese at times. I feel like it's too chaotic.
Agreed that we should have 2v2 just because we should have 2v2.
That's the classic way. In fact, that was the first time we messed around with that idea during the second visit to California. I think we did that. Just had one of the close-in maps, just set 2 ACs in the corner. An option. I know that can mess with your locks too. I know we were joking around. I trolled a little bit, by like sitting in front of one of the other ACs just to see if you could get away with doing something like that, and that was funny. But I guess that's one way to do it if you really, really, really wanted to. A good thing about that though, the 3v3, that opens up some really funny options. I know I've seen people doing stuff like all Mad Stomp ACs, or like that schematic, so everybody running around with chainsaws. That's just really, really funny and just fun to watch. So it's cool to see there's stuff like that that's still out there. But hey,
Nice.
Or how I got trolled the other day by my Discord, where they all came in with the double blank cooks and were just flames everywhere.
That was funny. We couldn't see the screen.
Yes.
So for those who have not been here at the start, I think so. Mainly at the very start, you get 2 kinds of builds. You get the builds that start to become meta, so people figure it out, and then one person beats one person really badly, and then it starts spreading out, and then it becomes the meta. And then you have sort of the weird designs where everyone's not quite sure what works yet, so you see sort of everything. So we had that at the start. I think it was a little bit more focused because of the August event, but you had your tanks with the dual Gatling guns and the Songbirds, and then you had your Zimmermans, and then you had your laser pistol builds. And then as the meta developed a little bit further and people's skill level generally started to rise, we also got more builds with like the Truenos, and then Cleric, what's the needle guns called? I can forget their name.
Oh, you talking about the launchers, the stun launchers?
The one that looks like a pistol.
Oh, you mean the yeah, I think they are called the stun pistols.
Okay, yeah, but that one, which focused heavily on sort of the damage, but also the ACS a good build, hand good builds, and sort of so on and so forth. In general, it's sort of weird. My opinion on it is that when it comes to matches now, it feels a bit more like a build check rather than a skill check, because there's a lot of cases where it feels like you can get basically beaten down without much chance to retaliate. And in fairness, that is part of the design of the single player, so not too surprised it carries over to the multiplayer. But yeah, that's sort of my initial thoughts so far.
I really only have one thing to say to that. It's been a month.
And to fairness, that is true. It takes a while for, that skill curve to catch up, because even just looking at from week to week, there's definitely been a lot more varieties in builds so far.
Hmm.
If they don't go against the dual Zimmerman, it's hilarious.
Well, it's just that these things in plus, the parts are going to get changed. Things are going to, From's going to end up nerfing things, buffing things. The meta is going to get figured out, but it's going to fluctuate.
Yep.
And even if there couldn't be upgrades, it would always still fluctuate. It would take forever to figure these things out,
And
because skill does play a part in it.
I think that's sort of one of the good things right now is you still have a pretty large chunk of people that are playing that. So, it means that development's happening a lot faster than it would, in 5 and Vertica, because sometimes it was 3 or 4 months before you saw a new build sort of get skilled up on.
Yeah.
Right.
I mean, that's some of the best stuff. Is when everyone's get everything figured out, that's kind of boring at that point. It's while people are figuring it out and learning, and you come across this new build, and you're like, "What the hell just killed me?" And that's the stuff. That's the stuff in the sauce.
Hostess.
Yeah.
I think another good example. There's some of the reviews of weapons. There's some things that are seen as utter trash right now that I think might be revisited at some point, and I looked at it in a different light, considering mechanically either how things work or how designs start heading in the way that works out. Really, I know outside of fun matches and stuff like that, I know a lot of 1v1 is what I'm going to be focusing on, what I'm excited to get into. I've only had a chance to do a couple on the side and as is, but I've really, really enjoyed during all my free time that I get, just similar to Cleric, sometimes going in and just pulling up what people are running, how are rooms going, what are lobbies like, what are people matching up with, what are some of the advice they're throwing around. And it's look, the thing that's heaven about it for me is that we're having these conversations again. I love it. And there's a sense of deja vu of early AC when you see this whole factory happening and people diving into the ideas and stuff. That part I love. I still think that's far from over.
I mean, I have probably right around 40 hours of PvP at this point, either playing it itself, watching it, or designing for it, testing with it, doing things with it. A lot of science things we've done with my Discord group. So 1v1 I think is probably some of the best it's ever been in the series in general when it comes to balance, aside from a couple of things. But like I said, I think people are still figuring some stuff out. People are insisting. People will probably quote me on this, and so they'll get beat, and they're like, "See, you're wrong." But to me, Laser Tank just blows away Zimmerman builds. It just does.
Laser Tank blows away almost everything.
Lasers are so brutal now.
Yeah. I probably have like a 75% win rate against dual Zimmermans with a Laser Tank. Like I just do. So I'll go into 1v1 to test out some funny idea I have. And I'll do pretty well, usually. And then when I win, they'll change their build. I'm like, all right, here it comes. And then I'll come into the next match. Next thing you know, all right, dual Zimmerman Terreno. I'm shocked. And so then I will then, in recompense, I will bust out one of my many different tank builds I have. I have like 6 different kinds of laser tanks on different legs that do different things that function in different ways. And I'll basically roll a dice, pick one. I'll go in and I win most of the time. Like it's just how it works. So in my opinion, but my biggest issue with 1v1 is this. So people talked a lot about back in 4 answer with the rock paper scissors, kinetic versus energy versus Kojima.
Oh yeah,
and all that jazz, right? You have some of that in this too, but it's not going to be rock paper scissors in the sense of damage types. It's going to be rock paper scissors in this form of what type of weapons you're running. Laser tank beats Zimmerman. Missile boats beat laser tank. And excuse me. It's laser tank beats Zimmerman. Zimmerman often will beat missile boat, and missile boat will often beat laser tank. So it's kind of like this triangle. So you have No, that's not a guarantee per se, but if you have people who are equally skilled in the game, so to speak, and they have the right kind of build against each other, generally speaking, that's kind of how it works most of the time. Now we've seen some upsets and some prizes in the tournaments that I've played in or have spectated,
Mhm.
but I think overall, I think 1v1 in the game is in a pretty good place mostly. Now, if you go to the AC Discord, they'll tell you it's complete garbage, but don't go there. It doesn't count. Um,
They'll tell you
I'll
what's
get some
complete
some
garbage.
crap for that one
1v1.
probably.
Oh, it does.
Um,
If you swim for it, if you dig, you got to dig around a bit. You got to dig around. You can find some, you know.
there's some generally good people in that Discord. But no, there's some people getting some new things figured out all the time, I think.
Sure.
And so I feel like Tearsin said, it's been a month. Give it some time. And not only that, balance patches
Yeah,
could throw most of this out the window
Yep.
anyways. So it's
exactly.
Probably right around the
like
corner.
people. And can I get on my soapbox for a minute? Is that okay?
Go ahead.
All right. So here's my problem, and I agree with you, Tearsin. It plays off that little bit we mentioned earlier. People are so quick to just pronounce judgment on the game, and it drives me insane because you're essentially calling a game crap because you think two weapons are too good. Really?
Well, even expanding outside that, think about what people say about the bosses, and based on that too,
Yeah.
just like say this is a bad game.
Yeah,
And
it just it's the problem I've always had with I'll say with the Armored Core community as a whole. I mean, it's not everyone, I realize that, but it's very kind of gatekeepy as far as how we approach the game and how we promote it to other people and how we describe it to other people. And everyone like there's literally a whole host. There's a couple people came into my Discord server. Like, if you want to play, the one guy was like, "If you want to play a real Armored Core game, come to the AC Discord and come play Last Raven." And I'm like, dude, seriously? Like, I didn't say
See,
anything. I didn't debate him. He left on his own. Like, I figured if I did, no one responded to him, he'd just go away, and he did. And so I'm like, that. This is the problem I had during the 4 and 4 answer era. It's the problem I had during the 5 and Verdict era. It's like, dude, like, just let people enjoy the game. If they're having fun,
yeah.
let them have fun. Like, why do you
Well,
care?
come on, Gen 4 is pretty shit though. Gen 4 is pretty shit.
so,
Okay,
It's, no, yeah, I know you're right though. You're right. I mean, I love Gen 3 even to this day. Like I said, I said it a week ago or so. I think with Cheng and Zealous, we need a remastered version of all the Gen 3 games that needs to come out, and we need to be playing that. But that being said, no, yeah, you're not gonna have this all figured out. That's why I'm not rushing, especially when I saw a couple weeks ago when they said the PvP patch is coming. I'm like, all right, well, I'm not even gonna.
Hmm.
There's not a lot of F's for me to give right now, right?
Where,
Because
and,
yeah.
it
and
it's coming.
and
So
the other thing I want to bring up here is, despite the general sentiment against those builds you mentioned, Cleric, they're not
yep.
that bad, all things considered. Like, if you look at sort of the history of, Armored Core stuff, like, you remember back in 5, pulse cannon tanks, or like quad zinnias
Oh
on an
gosh.
HRJ with flash rockets, like, those
Yep.
builds will
Yep.
like, this game has a pretty quick
Delete.
time to kill, but in 5, in 1.01, those builds could kill you almost instantaneously. So, I understand why it's annoying. It sucks to play those builds every single time when you come to it, when it comes to like a game with Armored Core where it's about customization. Um, but really, it's more of a call to action in terms of, hey, learn the game a little bit more, spend a little bit more time on other stuff, because there's definitely stuff that's going to work, and there's a higher skill curve. And the Zimmermans, the Songbirds, and the Gatling guns came out first because they're the easiest stuff. But I can guarantee you, even without that next patch, there are definitely things you can do.
yeah.
You have to
Sure.
put a bit more into the game, though, is the thing.
Well, so that's the thing, and I think I mentioned this before, just before AC6 release too. New games that come out, especially the very popular ones are AAA games. They shoot up like a firework, and then they come right back down. And that's just where a lot of people are with gaming now. And a lot of people grab onto that and they follow that firework and they move on to the next one. Um, Armored Core has never been like that. Like, if you're,
Nope.
if you're here for however long you're here, have fun, enjoy, grab a gun, and good deal. But Armored Core, that's a long burn. Grab a cooler, and you're going to be here a while. Theory crafting is going to go on forever. This is similar to an MMO commitment. And again, it doesn't have to be that. You can leave whenever you want. But the theory crafting and the strategies and the gameplay is going to go on that long.
Yeah, and circling back, I think this is why I want to just encourage people not to get either too burnt or jaded by the current state of PvP. Maybe parts or builds that you're finding annoying to deal with and stuff like that. Even spots you visit, Cleric, you were talking about the AC Discord. I'm not willing to, I think, dismiss it so quickly.
Nope.
There's some spots like 6th Gen Help. I know it's one I've looked at and I've tuned into, or like AC building that I think are good to zone in on. It's sort of where you choose to focus your mind. I think if you kind of get in on the more dramatic points and some of the points of contention, you focus on that and that becomes the thing. Okay, that might drag you down a little bit, but just like I was saying earlier, dig around, look for it. There is genuinely good info out there, and there's some genuinely good research happening. I don't think we're quite at the stage to completely evacuate any of those spots. So, even if you hate 4th Gen.
Hey, I've always said it's not my favorite, but honestly, we owe probably almost half of the current AC community to that game.
It's true. It's true.
Legitimately,
it's true. I've looked.
probably
I've
about
done.
half.
I've done. I'm on record now. I'm talking to Sash and a few others before. I wasn't the biggest fan of Gen 4, mainly because I see a lot of the problems it caused with LAN play, and I get it. Maybe I'm jaded from one perspective because of how the community got split between Xbox, PlayStation, and the confusion that resulted as a result of that. A lot of that comes from there, and then the different
There was
changes.
no crossplay.
Right, no crossplay. That too. And ironic, here we are again, but I think in a better situation per se. But it's an interesting ride. It's an interesting journey. I feel that a lot of the crazy mechanics in 4, quick boosting being so much more powerful back in 4 Answer than it is now. The really just crazy ping pong gameplay, just burning across huge landscapes at just stupid speeds all the time. And we sort of rein that in. So that I think it shows there were some ideas and some things that were very usable. Even the idea of a quick boost, but just sort of honing that down and kind of pulling it into like a reasonably cycle of gameplay kind of gives it that cool mechanic without making it too nuts. So, and I think that's what we have here for 6.
Yep.
So we started.
Right on.
Silence.
So we started talking about it. Our next topic is a little bit in here, but our next thing was going to be on community. So growth direction, growth direction, and gathering places. I have been sort of in the background, just sort of keeping my ear to the ground. Cleric, forgive me. This is, I think, another one of those areas where I'm going to have to rely on sort of your expertise because you've had a bit more hands-on than I have. What's your thoughts on the state of the armored community as a whole here?
So to not to keep beating a dead horse, as far as I'm not going to rip on the AC Discord anymore, but obviously that place exploded after the announcement of the game.
Okay,
they're adding new members constantly. Like if I go to their server right now and look at their reception thing, that alone, they've had, since we've started this chat just now, just our conversation, they've had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. They've had 19 people join their Discord server since we started. It has like an insane amount of members now. It's in the thousands at this point.
Yeah.
It's that, I mean, there's in PC, let's put it this way, they have like roles in PC AC6 alone. People who are tagged for playing Armored Core 6 on PC, they have 4,978 people. That's a lot of people. That being said, though, what you're seeing, though, even though some people were trying to naysay the game a little bit first, they had the whole Armored Souls conversation. You had the, well, this isn't my daddy's Armored Core kind of conversation. That's what I
I
like to
take
call it
that
now.
personally.
I'm right there with you, Tearsin. You have some of that conversation, but honestly, even the naysaying has not curbed the enthusiasm of a lot of new players. It really hasn't. I've seen some more genuine excitement. A lot of new players that I honestly have not probably seen since the start of, should I say, the four era, like back
Wow.
in that timeline. Like there's so much genuine excitement around the game. People enjoy playing it. They love making builds. They love making meme builds. They like trying out new things. They like doing the artwork pieces, the customization. They like a lot of the story missions. They like a lot of the story characters. Like there's a lot to be said that this is, generally speaking, um this is probably just a generally well received game, simply due to the fact that it is From Software now. Like From Software is quote no longer the quote unquote small video game community. People like jokingly like use that term nowadays. But it's, they write a checkbook now. Like they like, oh, this game's made by From Software, I gotta play it.
Yeah.
Like there's tons of people like that now, and despite some people not knowing what they're getting themselves into once they walked into Armored Core 6, there's a lot of people who seem generally committed to staying the course and enjoying the game for what it is and just having fun with it, which is amazing. And the reason why I said the 9.5, I said it's kind of rose colored for me specifically
Sure.
because organically, for whatever reason, the Discord server, which by the way I started as just on a whim, not really planning to do much of anything with it at all, no intention of being anything whatsoever, um, has just in the last 28 days it has
Yeah.
existed, is now at 300, almost 350 people.
Yep.
And they're all genuinely, for the most part, very positive. They love the game. They want to try out different aspects of the game. They ask for advice. They give advice. They're generally helpful. They have a wide variety of ideas. Someone will go like, "Hey, I want to test some stuff out," and then we have a game. Yeah, I got a minute, and they'll pop into a voice chat and play for a couple hours and test stuff out. Like, dude, the amount of nostalgia that this is invoking in the parts of my brain that feel that are like, it is on cloud nine. This is like watching the burgeoning of a new Armored Core form, like back in the early 2000s, all over again.
Late
Yeah.
And
90s.
it's what?
Late 90s.
I'll
Not
say
just
early
early
2000s.
2000s. Late 90s. Also
For
late
me, it was
90s.
early 2000s. For you, might have been late 90s.
For me, it was Tuesday.
For me, it was Tuesday. And it's the community, generally speaking, is pretty positive. Like it just is. You have some people who rag on the PvP a little bit, but honestly, people just like going into the game and having fun. That's what they like to do right now. They just like going into the game and having fun. I know it's a shocker, playing games for fun, because that's why we don't. That's not why we play games. No, no, we do it to complete. No, but you have it's honestly, it's in a good spot. Like the community is just, it's kind of just organically building itself, which is the coolest thing to watch.
That is awesome. That is
Cool.
awesome. That is
Cool.
part of the reason why, leading up to the release of this game, and I had said, I'm staying out of it. I'm sure a handful of people know. Most people probably don't know. I was a huge community leader back in the day, a big
One of the
tournament
OGs.
organizer. My time has come and gone. This is a different, and I say this in part just because other people who played when I played, and some of you were still out there. This is their time, and it sounds like they're doing a good job of it. Although I would question banning generators, but it's enjoy it. Enjoy the armored. Enjoy them enjoying the Armored Core we couldn't have. And that's where I'm at with it, because and I'm going to be out there. I'm going to be in verses. I'm going to be smoking these fools, but and I'll be lurking for the tournament events. But as far as being any kind of community leader or organizer, and
Yeah.
time is done. and our time should be done because we're old now. So let the kids have fun.
They
And
are
it
having
sounds like
fun.
they are. Yeah.
And
Yeah,
they are
yeah.
having fun, which is awesome to get to watch.
Very cool. Very cool. I think kind of brings me back to talking about things community-wise, and I meant this when I said it. I remember the words came to me then. I didn't have anything. It was like anything I didn't have scripted the day we were there, our last visit to California. But in part of the closing remarks, I said, the AC community has never been about any one person.
Yep.
That couldn't be truer now.
Yep.
It has always been incredible to watch this community do what it's done, especially the North American community, from a very grassroots feel. And we have always been just a stone skip strike away from the fighting game community. If you tip things any different, if we had a different level of support, there's this alternate crazy universe where the FGC didn't take off and Armored Core did. And I always smile about stuff like that. So it's just been really crazy seeing just sort of points that we talk about or things that we sort of put some texture to actually have life. And as we look at what happens in the current community now, it's great. It's great. And I hope it keeps going in that direction. I hope that grassroots feeling keeps driving it. This is in the hands of the current gen. It's awesome.
So
Yeah,
so
I
Jake,
do have to
go
amend
ahead,
that.
Tearsin.
If I do end up with the time, because with Gen 5, I really did enjoy the emblem editor and the decal editor. If I get the time to do that in this generation, I don't know. I might be in there with all the other artists sharing emblems and decals and stuff. You might
Cool.
see me
Go
in there
for it, man.
that,
It's so fun, dude.
I mean, that was something that never really existed before either. Obviously, we couldn't. Emblem editing was very simplistic prior to Gen 5, and even then, the game was, by Gen 5, the game was very, very niche, and so there wasn't a lot of sharing of stuff like that. So if it's a huge community now, I might end up doing that.
Cool.
But besides
So,
that, we'll
Cheng.
keep it out of it.
Hey, Cheng, so let me ask you. So you got to experience firsthand a lot of the new gen players, so to speak, to this game. Some of them have been around off and on a little bit since 4 and 4 Answer, but a lot of them are new players to the game. Got to see some of the shenanigans and other things that happened in that lobby. So was that like your first major interaction with that kind of stuff in this game, I assume, as far as this kind of stuff goes?
Just in this game?
In this game specifically?
No, not really. I have had some before, but like it's always hit and miss, Sometimes you get a try hard lobby, sometimes you get a fun lobby. But I think this is the first time where like I was actually on there and listening to people actually talk. So that was an amazing experience. That actually brought some 5 and Verdict Day memories back.
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask you. Like, how does it being in that Discord call with like 12 other people cycling through around and everyone playing, as you probably saw, a very wide variety of builds in that matches. Like, what was how that rate compared to how you used to do all those kind of team things back in 5 and Verdict Day?
I mean, it just felt like a free battle, just a nice and open one with people just messing around. It was amazing.
Cool.
Now, one thing I want to point out too is I've noticed that it's very small, but there are some places where like the growth is starting to slow down a bit. Like the Armored Core Reddit, before there were posts literally every minute. So if you refresh, you'd see new stuff all the time. That's starting to slow down a little bit. With the From Software Reddit, I noticed it's not filled full to the page with the Armored Core stuff. And some of the smaller groups are getting a little bit slower. Have you... This may be a question specific for Cleric. Have you noticed that at all as well?
Yeah, the like, for example, like I know Rubicon Dogs had an explosion, then kind of slowed down.
Yeah.
Right.
Raving Sanctuary had a big explosion, then it's really slowed down. My Discord has been steadily growing nonstop since it started.
Mm-hmm.
Honestly, I'm feeling kind of bad at this point. Like every tournament that people run right now, like half of the tournament is people from my server. I think the tournament that ran today, I think 5 of the top 8 were people from my Discord server.
Oh.
In fact, the guy who won it is
Man.
actually from it too. So yeah, it's like that has happened. Yeah, I've seen on Reddit, I've seen on the Facebook group, they're posting a whole lot less than they were before.
Mhm.
Mm.
Like there was a ton of stuff in there now. There's not many posts in there at this point. There's some still, but not as many. There's he who shall not be named is still doing things, but
Mhm.
there's you have the month, you have the couple days lead up, you have the hype, you have the people who enjoy the game for what it is temporarily, then move on to something else. Let's face it, there's a lot of other games to play that came out right before and right after it. I
Oh
mean,
yeah.
you have Baldur's Gate 3,
Yeah.
you have Starfield, Liza P is a big thing for some people.
Mortal
Yeah,
Kombat,
yeah, Mortal
Uh
Kombat
huh.
just came out. Yep, that's big for a lot of
Spider-Man next
people.
month.
Yep.
Street
Yeah, I
Fighter
mean,
6.
there's so many things that came out right before and right after. But I think the people who are kind of ingrained into the community and are enjoying the game for what the game is in of itself, and not just the variety of the week game they decide to play for like a month and be or a couple weeks and be done. I think that will. I think you'll see a slowdown in activity, but I think what you'll see people who really enjoy the game and stick around with it, I think you'll see them continue to stay active as a whole.
Yeah, a lot of them will stay active,
Sure.
and a lot of them will go away for a little bit, and then some of them will come back, and then the holidays will come, and then a whole bunch of people will get the game that didn't have it, and
Yep.
then next year will come the summer sale, and it'll probably be on sale on Steam and various other places, and you'll get a surge from that too. That's how it
The free
goes.
weekend on Steam.
Yeah, it ebbs and flows. But like I said, it's the way games are now. They shoot up like a firework.
Yeah.
I think it's
And
an analogy that on. Yeah.
Too many games. Too many games this year.
All right. So in that
Bad.
case, we're going to move to our penultimate topic here. It's going to be for melee stun, hard lock / auto lock combos, and also artificial limitations. So
Cool.
this one I'm going to leave pretty open. Is there anyone that anyone wants to start with? So, for example, one of the big ones, left arm. We can only use the melee weapons.
Right.
No, that's BS. I was not happy about that.
Yeah, and just to provide some context, when we did the interview originally with Yamamura and Ogura back in July, the reason that they gave for this is they wanted the sort of combinations and builds that people put together to be unique. And I think was there anything else, Cleric? I feel like that was the main part.
I feel like that was the main part too, but I vaguely remember them discussing something about they wanted melee to be very strong in this game,
Yes.
and I think they were worried about if they
Mm.
allowed it to be on both sides at once that it might just be too much.
Right.
Yeah, unique builds sounds like a nice way of saying double moonlights equals OP.
Although
Or
in some cases, you basically have that scenario since you could because you can have the melee weapon on both the arm and the back, and you can switch them very fast.
It's not as
Yeah.
fast as right and left though.
That is true. It's not the same.
That would be nuts. Like let's put it this way: imagine if you could like the pulse blade, like the start. Honestly, the starting blade in Armor Core 6 is phenomenal. It's
Yes, it
really
is.
good. And imagine being able to have 2 of those things.
Oh gosh, and imagine if we went to the grounds we went to in 4 and FA, and it wasn't just 2 separate swings that you were able to combo swing or combine like 2 blades into like a decapitation style strike, like a double or something. I mean, and that might even open up another window. That'd be nuts. Be nuts.
Yeah, the whole hard lock, auto lock thing, soft locks, all that stuff. Cleric I think said it best with his statement just before the game came out. Nothing else to say other than the fact that this is nothing new.
Yeah.
This is the way it is. This is the way it has worked. This is the way it's working now. There are various factors to the weapons and the parts that alter this, and that's the point.
Yeah. I think hard lock is pretty strong, especially in PvP and very close range, which is why it's so useful because the game is so close range focused. Could it use a little bit of adjustment? I don't know. I don't think the hard lock itself is what needs adjusting. I think the bullet velocity and the mid range and long range is what needs adjusted. I think if you make those things
Yeah.
better,
Mhm.
hard lock is in a perfectly fine place.
Yeah.
See, every time you say that, though, I think about what the things that pulled off playing through the single player, and it's like, oh man, if those guns were a little bit faster, nothing would have been tough. Everything would have been easy.
Crazy,
Yeah.
right?
Because I mean, some of these issues that show up in PvP that we've discussed, I don't know how they fix them without wrecking the single player experience. Especially when you start messing with the weapon, with the weapon velocities. Oh my god!
That's really tinkering. I mean, you're really messing with some fundamentals there. Furthermore, that kind of ties in this whole thing about combos and combinations. I think we've seen this, especially in some of the earliest parts of AC6, how you choose to put your attacks together. Can you take advantage of a stun window well? And if you can execute on that, what are some of the combinations you build and how fast can you smoke an AC? The answer is really fast if you have the combination of things together. It's crazy. But to me, it's part of the fun of AC6. Just because you get a stagger does not mean that it's an auto win. It is an opening. You have to have not just the conditions right in the field, but you have to have the conditions right on your AC and what you're doing piloting to actually take full advantage of that and make that happen and make that kill happen. As far as combos that you guys have seen, Cleric, I'm going to defer to you a bit here. If there's anything you found really oppressive or feels really oppressive from versus and being online, but I have immensely enjoyed about just how much works and the juggle, the combo to vary it. You get the stun and then you drop the assault boost kick and then you drop the cannon hit behind it and then you drop the assault armor. There's just this cool chain of events that almost adds this sort of a fighting game element that I never thought I'd see in Armored Core. It's wild.
So a funny one that actually Ouroboros is responsible for making a little bit popular is punching into chainsaw.
Nice.
So essentially you have nothing in your right hand, but you have a Zimmerman equipped on your back right shoulder slot, so you can swap to it.
Right.
So essentially what you do is you go up and you hit them with the Zimmerman shot while assault boosting to get the stagger built up. And then you swap it out and start punching them, get them down to ACS down, and then charge your chainsaw and chainsaw them. And it has some of the highest direct hit damage modifier with damage charged that it takes out like 8 KAP or more.
Lead with lead with the jab. Lead with the jab, set it up, and go for the cross. The hook got it. Okay.
Pretty much, yeah. It's funny, real funny. Yeah, of course you have double shotguns, which is shotgun them, swap, shotgun them, swap, shotgun them, swap. Yeah. People doing that kind of stuff. My personal favorite right now is I jokingly made my PvP for the biped tournament was stun and whack.
Stun and whack came back. You got that again, dude. Yes.
Essentially, it's running the energy Werger shotgun on the right, the laser blade, the one where you charge it up. It does two big, huge circular swipes. It does a ton of ACS, and I had the dual back wing energy cannons. So I seriously just sit there charging them up the whole time, and then I get them close to stagger, double blade them, and then whack it. It's like also like 8K damage. It's stupid.
Yeah, and I think just to cover them all here, I mean that's kind of like not the purpose of what we're doing. We're talking about some highlights and some things we've run into that we found interesting, and I think overall does that feel too oblique, too obtrusive with the gameplay? And no, I don't think it does. To me, that this has added another discovery loop on top of finding a new evolution of your design, on top of finding a cool new part or a new trick. This is great because it is like the application of set part. So as far as something that's come into, it's been added as a result of AC6 having this, so I wouldn't swap it for anything. I love it. I love it.
Yeah, dude, it's like watching a fighting game match. It's like, oh, he salt boosts in. Oh, he gets the kick. Oh, he gets the shot. Oh, he gets a second kick. Like,
Yeah.
seriously, it's what it's like watching the game. So yeah,
So,
Very
talking
cool.
about stun and whack, that's going to be the last portion of our topic before we reach our final topic, and that is stun and sort of ACS and stagger as a whole. Where do we feel that sort of stands right now? Is it too strong, too weak? Certain cases, it's okay.
Mm.
it's a little too strong. Certain weapons have a harder time getting others. Obviously, that's part of the reason Zimmermans are as strong as they are, especially with your assault boosting. Because if you're assault boosting, a kinetic weapons get to do additional stagger damage. If you shoot someone with a kinetic
Right.
weapon while you're assault boosting, it does additional stagger. That's part of the reason why Zimmermans are as strong as they are. So that's probably what needs. But I think their damage is fine. Their stagger is what needs backed off. But yeah, I think stun as a whole is a little too strong. Um, and I don't think you have to balance it out in the sense of reducing how much stagger damage people are doing. I think you need to do that. My personal opinion is you do that in a way. Does two things. One, your ability to recover from stagger should be something you can balance around better than you currently can. You can't manipulate it enough, really, in my opinion.
It's too simple.
Not enough,
Yeah.
anyways. And two, I feel like a cumulative stagger needs to drop off faster, in my opinion.
Mm.
I think people keep talking about how stagger is a big problem. No, the fact that so many things can keep it sustained for so long, so well, that it's just like I'm constantly. And if you run away, it's like usually you're used to it in games, right? Where you remember when you're overheating in a match and you'd run away to get your heat back, right?
Hmm.
So you'd stop in the, so it wouldn't be burning anymore, right? Doing that in this game is worse when it comes to stagger. Because if you're on the borderline of being staggered and you run away to try to get that drop down, like you're waiting sometimes as much as 10 seconds to get your stagger bar
That's
back down to 0.
that's an eternity.
It's
Eternity.
rough.
Yeah,
So
it is.
I think if the accumulative stagger was backed off some and it dropped off quicker,
You-
I think that would help a ton.
You're highlighting actually my key. You're actually hitting right on something. When we came into this topic, that's one thing I was thinking about. My issue has been way less about stagger itself existing because as Tearsin and others here have said, it's almost like an evolution of heat. I have no problem with the mechanic itself. I really don't. It's the build up, the accumulation, the cancel options. I mean, we're looking about things outside of activating armor, to do like the cancel out in a big hard stock like that. I mean, that's the equivalent for those of you out there who played Blaze Blue, and you come in and you start gold bursting round one. Like it sucks to feel you have to do that, just to escape like a stun. You're like, oh man, now I've really screwed over my options. In the same hand, there aren't as many viable ways to safely tamp that down. And then if you have someone really keeping on pressure too, I mean, good luck trying to get rid of that. Right now there really aren't many hard escapes for that, or things that you can just readily count on. I mean, besides not getting there in the first place, but because of the nature of the gameplay loop, and because so many weapons are effective at that 300 and less range, naturally you find yourself in these pressure situations more than some of the previous Armored Core games that you tended to be played at slightly more safer ranges. Less close combat, more mid range, potential mid long range stuff like that. But I think that's on the money about build up.
Agreed.
And you mentioned melee. I think I said earlier, melee's great. Melee in this game is so
It's
good.
very
It's
satisfying.
so good.
As someone, because of a tragic accident that stopped carrying blades in competitive play in the PS2 generation, Cleric knows down the road. Yeah, dude, it broke me as a man. It broke me. But
Why?
AC6 has changed that. Melee is bloody fantastic, and yeah, we were talking about this. I think the Reddit AMA before full release, people were asking about the pile bunker. It's just one. It's awesome, brutal as it felt before, but it's even besides that. Gosh, like the lance, and I mean the twin blade. We can go on all day about this. The cool melee options. Yes, it would be nice to still be able to dual blade and have them in each hand, but the amount of options we have. Look, I'm entertained. I have immensely enjoyed mounting non-melee weapons back in my designs here. I love it.
Silence.
Silent lines.
It signifies that we're now on our final topic. So
Awesome.
we've talked through a lot of different things here. We've gone through the review, and then also went through some additional details. But for our final topic here, and I want to talk through this through the lens of like the fact that the people we have on this call are, not just members of the community, but also experienced members that have taken part actively in the community. What happens next? What does the community need to do next, either to survive tomorrow, wait for AC 6.5, blah, blah, blah? Where do we go from here?
Well, it's only been out a month. Get back and play some more Armored Core 6. That's where you go. You'll turn the game back on.
Turn the game back on.
Don't sleep. Just Armored Core 24/7.
No sleep until clear.
Well, where do we go?
Yeah.
Go back to your PlayStation and play some Armored Core.
So
Listen, we have Armored Core not left alive anymore.
So one thing
Enough said.
I did want to point out here, and this is the reason why I bring up the topic, is that a lot of what made the old Armored community work is the involvement of its members. And even though Armored Core has reached a larger scale than it used to, there's, I think, some estimates of sales of like 1 million for just the PC release alone.
Oh yeah,
Love it.
I think you and I did some rough numbers. We were well into the 2 billions for
2 billions
for this one. No, 2 million. I said million.
Okay, I could have.
2 billions. Yes, please.
That'd be great.
More Armored Core players. Do it.
Yeah. But yeah. So what I was saying was, even with this huge initial success, I think we do need to remember that Armored Core is, still very much a niche series. So a lot of what's going to determine our future success, assuming there's an Armored Core 6.5 or DLC, which I'm hoping there is, based on what's been talked about, this is something where the community is still going to need to be active, run tournaments, events, talk, just do all things Armored Core. It's easy to get complacent in the face of everything that's going on, because right now, it still looks pretty good. But this can all change in a heartbeat. So my message to the community is don't stop what you're doing. Just keep playing, keep doing stuff, and just being awesome out there.
Cool.
Just keep being awesome. There it is.
Yeah. And I think this is the good part. It feels less like we have to have all these very specific grassroots movements, spearheaded by very specific organizers, or sort of like shepherded into an infamy anymore. I mean, the community's on a hot streak now, for sure. And like you said, it can be easy, I think, to get a sense of complacency with that, Cheng. But yeah, the more is going to come from, I think, more doing. More people continue to engage with Joy AC6, and the mini tournaments we've got, the way that online has kind of made things possible that we really didn't even have available during LAN era. I mean, the reason why we drove across state lines to do this stuff and Hall TVs was, well, there's no other way. You had excellent Kai and a few other things like that, but I mean, it was nowhere near that of having that dream of at least some solid inbuilt net play. If I want to sit down and do a match of Armored Core, I can do that from in-game. I don't have to go around the bin to get third-party software and do tunneling and do router port forwarding and all the crazy contortions that we did to play this game. Bass, like, you don't have to do that, and that's awesome. While we do those things, though, and I think that's just focusing on the raw sort of networking gameplay aspect, while we do all those things, I think simultaneously it's going to be really important to promote, I think, sort of the better instincts. And by some of the better instincts, I mean, like, you run across somebody struggling with Balteus, don't try to gatekeep them. Just maybe actually throw out a good suggestion of like, hey, here's a cool part to use, or that's what I used, or here's an idea or something you could try, or at least kind of find it to the scrub, get good, and just staying away from the things that could be detrimental to growth. It's going to be an interesting chord to strike. And I've always said this, the Armored Core community has never been really a Care Bears spot. It's never been a uh, the ultra friendlies, super, not necessarily, but it's because you have a community of people who love this game, and because they're passionate about it, and because it is a very niche series. There is this sort of standoffishness about it at first, about the people who kind of approach, are you really into it? Are you just trying to try this? I've seen a slow change in that now, though, especially with how many people are getting into AC, and I have seen those better instincts, to take over in a lot of cases, which is, directing people where they can find some info, sort of telling them a bit about the game, maybe helping answering a question or two, things like that. It doesn't mean you have to sit and give somebody an FAQ all day, or you got to be beholden, or, somehow now I'm responsible for every new player that comes. Don't overburden yourself. Enjoy it, have fun with it. I mean, jam out, for God's sake. Goodness sake. We have Armored Core after like over a decade of drought. That means everything, you know. So just get out there and enjoy it.
We have Armored Core with a budget.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
They took one of the best things from Last Raven and went even further with it. I remember the shotgun LR, and an AC would explode, literally explode. I mean, it's so much more fantastic here. You'll go like head first, or you'll go in like to a roll or something like that. It's just cool. That's just cool.
And if they have a coral generator, they have a coral explosion when they die.
That's even better, right?
Yeah.
So crazy, dude. So crazy.
Yeah, I almost couldn't say that what you guys already said. Like, seriously. Like, keep doing what you're doing, keep having fun, keep enjoying the game for what it is. Do what do what you're gonna do that makes you enjoy the game, and keep enjoying it. Like, don't feel pressure to do PvP if you don't care about PvP. Don't be pressured to do art stuff if you're not an art person. Like, don't be just enjoy the game how you want to enjoy the game. And as long as you're not spoiling it for other people, I'm cool with it.
Awesome.
There you have it.
So in that case, I think that is going to be everything, guys. So appreciate all of you who are still listening in. We're going to spend a quick moment here just doing our outro. So first, thanks for listening in. I'm FromCheng. You can find me on the Armored Core Legacy social medias. On Twitter, it's at AC Legacies, and then on the Twitter and the Facebook, and as well as the YouTube, it'll be Armored Core Legacy. And then we'll start with Cleric here, if you want to give out your links or shout outs.
Yep, Cleric here. You can find me on mostly doing YouTube stuff. Actually, I feel like I'm doing more Discord stuff than YouTube stuff at this point. You can find me at Cleric Armored Core. I put up videos a couple times a week. I stream a couple times a week. Mostly just kind of hanging out with people from the Discord, having fun, and just playing the game. And just for notoriety purpose, not notoriety, but for information purposes, a couple tournaments coming up. Got No Missile one coming up here soon, and also a really big one, a surprise one that I look forward to announcing fairly soon, that I think a lot of people are going to enjoy, and I can't wait to share details on it. So, and Zealous himself will be there, co-commentating with me, with his as I think I described you in my video, the king of Armored Core drip. I think is the way I described.
Oh my
you.
god, dude! Yes.
So yes, see y'all online. And also, welcome to join my Discord. If you go to my YouTube channel, wherever it goes, there's a link always in all the videos and in the about page. Seriously, the Discord, I shout out to my Discord. They're amazing people. I talked about that organic growth. How I managed to have a whole bunch of really awesome people join the Discord and be awesome the whole time. Don't know how I managed it, but you know what? I'll take the win. They're amazing. So go. You want to have fun playing the game? Go hang out there. They're a great group of people to play with.
Take the dub. Cool stuff. Guys, thank you for tuning in. Anybody, of course, who's still listening out there, like Cheng has said, it's been awesome. If there's ever been a time to come back and talk to concerns, topics, things that concern the AC community, and going forward, past, and where we are now, this is the time. It's been the honor of a lifetime to just be here again, just to be doing this stuff. I love it. If you guys want to just follow things outside, I am still working on some a lot of quad-based content. Right now, I started out with some streaming. I stream at least once a week on Fridays, and I might change more on my channel where I do my music. You can catch me on twitch.tv/ZenoDrums. I'm actually live 3 times a week. I mostly do drumming, drum covers. If you guys like Armored Core music, you want to hear some, I don't know, Insurance Money, or like one of the like Stinger themes, hit me with it. I do live drum covers, and I'd love to play to it, especially like video game music, anime music, that kind of deal. And of course, you can catch me there doing AC6. I'm also going to be streaming PvP and my runs in that, and part unlocking, and just talking about the game in general, and structure, flow, how I approach design, the whole deal, and just freaking enjoying Armored Core again. So I'd love to see you guys out there. I recently started a YouTube page where I'm going to be posting mostly music. Still, I'm looking to see where that's going to go in terms of Armored Core, etc. But again, Z Note Drums. You can also catch me there, and on Insta and Twitter, I am the same name across all of those spaces, and I would love to see you guys there. In addition, Tearsin's going to get into this a bit. I don't want to steal any thunder. We do co-plays, some let's plays, some couch potato plays, some co-op play on his channel on YouTube, the Dracolich. I'd love to see you guys stop by there. So there's plenty of places you can catch us. Of course, I'm at FromCheng, The Legacy. I hope to see you guys out there for some of the events and tournaments alongside Cleric and many others. And guys, till next time, keep it cool.
I mean, he already said it, but yes, the Dracolich, Dracolich on YouTube. Tiny little YouTube channel, but you'll find a lot of big action there. Lots of co-op gameplay. Zealous is in almost everything. Cheng is starting to show up in some stuff. We got some crazy guys. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a great idea.
There it is.
Yeah.
I mean, it's four player co-op stuff most of the time. It's a lot of fun. What do we got up there? We got World War Z. We got Dark Tide.
Dark Tide play.
I watched you
crazy,
guys' Shredder's Revenge playthrough. That was fun to watch. You guys were having a good old time.
Yeah, we did that.
That was good.
We hit up a lot of different stuff. You don't always have to play Armored Core, but you should play Armored Core.
Blasphemy.
But, go check it out. Help me out. Give me some subscribes and some likes and all
Give
that
him some
stuff.
love. Do it.
There. That's it. Thank you.
Yep. Thanks again for watching, guys, and we'll see you pilots around.
See you on Rubicon.
See ya.